Well, welcome back after our technical glitch and the recordings that were duplicating our voices. Council, we'll try to get through this one again. So right now we're at the delegation presentation from Jamie and Ellen. We're just beginning to start that. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank council. I want to thank our staff and those who may be joining us via the YouTube channel that we're recording right now that we will have to put on it later in the day, basically because of glitches in the system. So I'll leave it now up to Jamie and Ellen. So your presentation, Ellen, you want the screen to be shared? Help yourself. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. I will endeavor to share. There we go. So as Jamie alluded to, we're going to break this presentation today into two parts. I'll first start with kind of an overview of the county's municipal comprehensive review, and then Jamie will take it over and discuss the draft county official plan and lead a bit of a discussion there. So as alluded to, the county is currently undertaking their municipal comprehensive review, which is in part to determine how population and employment growth will be allocated to all the lower tier municipalities to the year 2051 in accordance with the growth plan projections. Detailed growth forecasts and allocations were released in September of 2021 in draft by the county. We've had a review of those allocations and provided some preliminary comments to the for the township's consideration. And today we'll just kind of provide a bit of an overview of those draft allocations and some of the preliminary comments there. As Candace noted, since the release of these draft forecasts and allocations, the county has completed some further work and has, which includes a request to the province for an alternative intensification target for residential development, which we'll discuss in detail a bit further into the presentation. And as noted, there will be an update to these growth forecasts and allocations from the county at a later date. So one of the principal components of the county's MCR process has been to determine the allocation of population growth that each lower tier municipality, including the township, is set to receive to the year 2051. Now, if you focus in on the row here with respect to the draft county forecast and allocations, the draft forecasts, which were released by the county in the fall, allocated the township 12% of the total growth for the county to 2051. Now this equates to roughly a projected population increase of 2,350 people to the township to 2051, and an estimated demand for new residential units of about 1,220. Now it's noted that this allocation of 12% is higher than what is currently provided for the township in the current county official plan. And the current county official plan provides an allocation of 8.5% to the township currently. Now, in looking at the recent development activity in the township, we did note that this allocation that has been provided to the township in draft of 12% is in fact lower than the recent development activity that the township has experienced over the last couple of years. So in particular, new residential growth in the county between the years 2016 and 2021, the township accounted for 14.6% of all new residential growth in the county, which is higher than what the county has been allocated through the draft provided by the county. So if you round this number up to about 15%, if the township were to receive 15% of the new growth to 2051, we would see a higher estimated population increase by about 553 additional persons, and an increase of approximately 283 additional residential units from what is currently provided in the draft allocations. And again, this is based on the recent developments that the township has seen proportionate to the rest of the county.
Just to add to that, if you were, just go back to that for 1 second. Just to make it clear, you have seen these numbers before in the first report and first presentation we provided to council. This information was provided. And that's one of the comments that the municipality made back to the county on their September document, was that we believe the county that the 12% should be increased to 15% to be reflective of the actual trends and what has historically been happening. And it's our understanding that in January, there was some preliminary revisions that have been provided, or a presentation provided by the county. And it was our understanding that they were looking at increasing the amount of allocation to in and around that 15% range. So that was something that the county, it appears that they've received those comments and that request, and that they were looking at making those changes, or at least that's what had been conveyed to us. Understanding that there's been some more recent discussions that Candace has had, and they may be looking at some other options as well. But it was originally conveyed to us that there seemed to be an opportunity for the township to achieve that growth rate based on the 15% number of what the county's overall allocations are to 2051. Is that accurate, Candace, or was there anything you wanted to add to that? I know there was some jockeying back and forth in the last meeting, but
yes, that is all historically correct. Where we stand today is, I think it's really important coming out of today's meeting to back that recommendation again from council and report back in again, because it hasn't been finalized. We haven't been told, yes, you're getting the 15%, or unequivocally, no, you're not, because of A, B, C, and D. It's been conversations back and forth. There's been communications back and forth. There's been some conversation with Hempson at the TAC meetings, but we don't have a final decision as of yet. So I think part of a deliverable or an action item coming out of today's meeting would be to reinforce that September recommendation and the communication in January to say council still feels, the township still feels that building permit activity should drive this decision, especially since council is aware that the growth demands and growth pressures on the village, the 1,500 units based on what is happening currently in conversations with land parcels within the village and within the settlement area, we will need the 1,500.
I have a question. So it's Roger here. Just Candace, so the county's already sent their draft onto the province now. So, and then all of our individual townships are involved in that, and they've sent that onto the province. Are we stuck now at that specific thing? Like, as county can back that up still if we're able to be in their good graces, basically going forward to say, yeah, we need the 15%, so they can change that on the province's end?
Yes. Nothing has been the final draft, like we're in the commenting period right now. And it is my understanding when you go out for a commenting period that you may have to take comments into consideration and amend the document to reflect the comments received if possible. That said, there's no guarantee that every comment that is made is going to be taken into consideration and actually amend the document. But I mean, its commenting period is open. Now's the time for us to make our comments and solidify what it is we would like to see happen in the final document that's submitted to the province for their approval.
Thank you.
I just have a question, Roger, and this can be for anyone. And moving forward, a lot of that's going to depend on what the intensification rate comes back as from the province as well as the growth allocations. Is that correct with that? That's two of the main things that we're waiting on?
Yeah.
I could maybe just answer that. Yes, those are two things that we're waiting on for certain. And that'll drive the amount of the intensification piece really drives the amount of additional greenfield lands that are necessary. And we're going to get into that in detail as we go through this presentation.
Thank you.
Are we good to carry on?
Yeah, Alan,
Yes.
carry on. Thank you.
Perfect. So similarly, with how the county has provided a draft population allocation, they have done the same exercise as it relates to forecasting employment within the county. And based on the draft allocations that were provided in the fall, the township has been provided a draft allocation of 8.3%, which equates to a projected employment increase of 890 jobs to the year 2051. And it's noted that there's currently no employment allocations within the current county official plan. So this is a map showing the settlement area of Norwood. Provincial policy directs for the majority of growth and development to occur within settlement areas, particularly those that are serviced with both municipal water and sewage. Within the township, Norwood is the only fully serviced settlement area and is therefore projected to accommodate the majority of growth within the township to 2051. Now the map on your screen shows two components of the settlement area. In green, and I guess the color really outlines the boundary of the settlement area, with the red denoting the delineated built-up area. The delineated built-up area comes into play when we speak about the intensification target and how much growth is required to be accommodated through intensification. So when we speak about intensification, that's the number of units and population that needs to be accommodated within this red area. The green area on the screen are the township, are Norwood's greenfield areas, and we will speak about that in the next couple of slides as well. So growth that isn't accommodated through intensification in the built-up area is accommodated in the township's greenfield lands, which are denoted in green.
Just to add to that quickly, Alan, Council, as you can see, Norwood Park is not in the built-up area, and the current recent development applications are directly to the east of the built-up area. All of our subdivisions and all of our growth is all out of the built-up area. We don't have a lot of parcels or opportunity. Obviously, you know the village well, you know what's incorporated. This is a historically built up area of the village, and so it's really hard to intensify something that's our majority's already been built for 50, 60 years. So that is why it's easy to see in a visual now that this is why we've requested the 40% to go down to 15%, and how almost impossible it would be for us to achieve, to intensify and make that purple built up area more dense to a 40% target. Like it's not even possible. So we just hope that the province sees it our way. Sorry, Ellen, carry on. Sorry.
No, that's a great point, Candace, and it's something we'll elaborate kind of on the next slide as we kind of take that 40% and show what it looks like in a number of units. And as Candace alluded to, given the small area of the built up boundary within Norwood, and the stable nature of it, there's limited opportunities for intensification that currently exist. So when we look at the draft allocations and forecasts that were provided in the fall, as noted, it was a 40% intensification target that was provided for the township, as well as the other serviced settlement areas within the township. So 40% of new growth, what that means is 40% of new growth that the township is expected to accommodate to 2051 is to be accommodated within that existing built up area, or that red color on this map. And what that equates to when you look at the allocations that were provided is you're looking at under an intensification of 40%, there's an estimated 488 residential units that would need to be accommodated within that existing built boundary. And from our preliminary review, and as Candace touched on, an intensification target of 40% or 488 units is really not likely achievable within Norwood due to that small built boundary and really stable residential nature of Norwood that's existing. And recognizing this to a degree, the county has provided a request to the province to reduce this minimum intensification target to 15% for all new growth that's occurring annually within that built boundary. Now, under a 15% intensification target, this would equate to approximately 183 units that would need to be accommodated within the built boundary of Norwood. And from the review that we completed last year, this is fairly consistent with what we estimated could be accommodated within that existing built boundary. We were looking at approximately 200 units, which would be an intensification target of about 16%. Now, it is noted through the further review that the county has done. We understand that there was a presentation provided in January, which suggested that Norwood could potentially accommodate a higher intensification target of approximately 33%. And using this target, this would equate to about 555 units being accommodated within Norwood, within the existing built up area, which from our review isn't feasible. So on that basis, it's the intensification target that's been requested stems from an averaging across all lower tier municipalities in which Asphodel-Norwood perhaps accommodates a higher intensification target than that 15%.
Could you just go back to the map for a second, Ellen?
Yeah.
So council, the takeaway point is similar to the last point. I think we need to be very clear with the county that the intensification target of 15% is something that we support, and that anything higher than that we think is not realistic or not achievable. And to achieve that higher intensification target would result in a complete change of the character of the neighborhood and a character of this community. There's a couple of reasons for that. It's a small geographic area. In geographic terms, the settlement, like the built up areas, there are limited opportunities within that geographic boundary to accommodate intensification. The lot sizes and the stable nature, as Alan mentioned, of the community is existing. So it would mean there would likely be an erosion of that existing stability of the neighborhood if you were to achieve that higher intensification target and 500 additional units. Like, it's almost doubling the size of the community effectively. Secondly, there's just not the infrastructure in the municipality or the ability to have multi-story buildings to the extent that would be necessary to accommodate that sort of that level of intensification. And there's not the ability to fight the fires associated with those sorts of buildings and all the rest of the infrastructure needs that come along with increased density. So that's really some of the reasons why we think it's not feasible, and that there needs to be a bit more realistic in terms of recognizing that this isn't Markham, or it's not Richmond Hill, or it's not the city of Toronto, it's not the city of Barrie. Like, it's Norwood, and there's a different ability to accommodate intensification for those reasons. So we think, again, that the takeaway point is just reiterate what was provided previously, that 15% is the right number for us.
Jamie, can you touch on how that built up area for council's benefit, the province determines the built up area and that it's not adjustable? Because I think it would be important for them to know, because why can't we just make it bigger, or how it's determined, and do you mind touching on that?
Sure. So the built up area was, so every settlement area within the Greater Golden Horseshoe had a built up area provided or delineated for it as part of the preparation of the growth plan. And what it reflects again is lands that are currently developed, or lands that have draft approval or registered subdivision on them, for example. So that's how this area was delineated at that point in time.
And it was done without consultation. The township wasn't, they didn't go out to the municipalities and have conversations with them when these built up areas were determined. So it was something that was provided to us. Whether we agree or disagree, it's just a tool we have to work with within this exercise.
Yeah.
And Jamie, if I can just ask, and further to your point, we don't have the ability to modify or change that built up area then?
Not right now. Like it really wouldn't matter. Like if you were to modify the built boundary to include the subdivision development that's currently occurred. So let's say stuff on the northwest portion of town. That's not, including those lands is not going to give you a greater ability to increase the number of, or the intensity, or increase the a number of units within the town. Like that's a recently developed greenfield area. It's been built effectively in accordance with the growth plan policies. Like there's not an ability to remove houses and put up apartment buildings in that area.
Yeah.
That's why the built up area was really dealing with, okay, what existed at the start of the growth plan period? How do we make the most efficient use of those lands? And we're going to do it by setting these intensification targets for these areas. And again, the reason here is why it's not appropriate: limited geographic area, limited infrastructure capabilities and emergency capabilities, and existing stable neighborhood and fabric of the community effectively. And those various reasons, it's just not conceivable that you could jam another 500 people in this red area.
Okay, thank you.
Jamie, it's Councillor War, if I may ask a question.
Absolutely.
I was just wondering about brownfields as opposed to the greenfields, and if the current landfill site that's existing above the mill pond would be like a brownfield area. Like I know it's not an industrial site, but would that area be able to be swapped out for a settlement area?
Just want to make, so two things. I said 500 people, I meant 500 units when I was just finishing up there, but is what you're saying, could we remove that brownfield area from the settlement area and add settlement area land somewhere else? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That's something we're going to get into at the very end here, is potential options for considering. And I think the big picture point you're making is that back in the day when we drew our settlement area boundary, like there might be more lands now that are more appropriate to be in versus lands we included previously, and how do we deal with that dynamic? So I think, but we're definitely gonna deal with that at the end. So
thank you.
That thought.
And Jamie, I have a quick question. Certainly the comments you made about the intensification, there's no way we can build 20-story apartment buildings, and we don't have the infrastructure for firefighting and all of that. So if right now we'd like the 15%, and we're fighting against a province who is very urbanized with this, and if it comes back that it sits at 30% for Asphodel-Norwood, what happens then? What are the repercussions of not being able to do that? Does that take away from the amount of growth we can do in the greenfield areas? I guess maybe it's a bit of a rhetorical question, but I'm wondering if that path has to be taken, where do we go?
It's a good question. So first off, what it would mean is that from a projection perspective or allocation perspective, they're going to say you don't need as much greenfield area as you thought because of how much is going to, or we anticipate is going to occur within the built up area. So it reduces the amount of greenfield area you get. Then that's from a planning perspective. So ultimately, like the amount of land you can have designated for future in the official plan for future growth, it needs to be a balancing effect. So you're probably going to end up with less residential land designated area wise from a geographic perspective than what you otherwise might have if it was a 15% number. So that's point one. Point two is like how, when the rubber really hits the road on this thing, it is if someone's applying for, I think the question you're ultimately getting at, if someone applies for additional to do a subdivision in the greenfield area and we're meeting our intensification target, does that affect our ability to approve that greenfield subdivision at the end of the day? And I don't think it does. It's a target at the end of the day. You have to demonstrate that you're working towards those targets, and you've got some policies that promote meeting those targets, but I don't think it's going to impact your ability to approve greenfield development or subdivision, draft plans of subdivision. I say that sort of with a caveat, I guess, at the end, like if it's very clear that that there's no intensification happening and you meet and now you've grown out to the absolute limit of your greenfield, and you're going to the county now to say, well, we need an expansion to this settlement area because we've met our max, and they're going to come back and say, well, you've done nothing to promote intensification. Like, I don't know, it's difficult to say, but that's like something I could see potentially happening. But at the end of the day, it's not law. It's a target at the end of the day. It's not a requirement, it's a target. But it's something that it more affects us at the planning and land supply stage than I think it does at the development approval stage, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
And just to jump in there, I completely agree. I don't think it's going to necessarily affect the development approval stage. If the province comes back with a 30% and does not approve our 15, ultimately the upper tier, Peterborough County, is the subdivision approval authority. So at that point in time, it isn't the province that is approving those. So the county will understand, based on they submitted the request for 15, that the province has come back and said 30, that we're not able to achieve 30. So if we're putting in applications for growth in the greenfield, but we are achieving or attempting something of intensification in the built up area, they already know going in that we're not going to be able to achieve the 30%. They knew that when they submitted the request to the province for the 15. So I don't see them holding our feet to the fire to that after the fact, regardless of the provincial decision. I think the approvals would move forward as long as we can demonstrate what it is that they need to see for the targets and the intensification. I don't see it affecting the approval process. Sorry, Alan, we sidetracked you.
Oh, no, I think that works well. And that ties, I think, nicely into what the greenfield land consumption might look like and projected demand for land based on allocations and various intensification targets. So
can I just summarize? We got 2 points so far that we're making back to the county, is that the most recent one is that we're going to provide comments that the 15% intensification target is the one that we want to focus on still.
Yeah, at the very end, we'll have to draft up some form of a motion. So any comments that you can write down now to help with that motion later, that's great. Thank you.
I'm sure Ms. White is working on that motion right now as we go forward with the detailed taking.
Of course I am.
So I understand this is probably a bit of an overwhelming table. So if you kind of draw your attention to this cell here, this is the 15% intensification target that we've been speaking about. So what does our residential land demand look like with a 15% intensification target? So under the draft county forecasts and allocations that have been provided, which allocates the county, not the counties, rather the township 12% of the county's growth to 2051. If we were to take that projected population increase and assume that 15% of that new growth can be accommodated within the delineated built up area, we're looking at an estimated household demand of about 1,037 units in the Greenfield area in Norwood. And that's assuming all growth occurs within Norwood, which won't be the case, but for the purposes of this exercise, that's the assumption that's been made. So if we look at that approximately 1,000 units that need to be accommodated in the Greenfield area of the township, and we assume a density of 40 residents and jobs per hectare, which is the direction from the province. And then we factor in, so apologies, we can circle back if any of this is a bit confusing, but and then we factor in that we actually require a bit more land for constraints and infrastructure. We're looking at approximately 125 hectares of greenfield land that would be required to accommodate new growth in the township under a 12% population allocation. If you were to look at a higher allocation, which is this last row, a higher population allocation for the township, say that 15% that we had previously discussed, you would have a higher projected population increase, a greater household demand, and under that same, I guess, intensification target of 183 units. So it's the 15%, but factored into a higher population increase. You're going to have a higher household demand in the Greenfield area, and subsequently a higher demand for land of about 159 hectares. And that factors in, again, constraints and requirements for infrastructure to service new developments such as roads. I'm not sure if there's any questions on that at the moment. I appreciate it's a lot of numbers on the screen. So
can I just provide one piece of color there, is that in that last column, we've made some assumptions there. We've assumed that if you had a 100-acre parcel or a 100-hectare parcel, for example, that 50% of that is going to be constrained and 10% is going to be used for infrastructure, whether it's roads, stormwater, those sorts of things. So, and that's why we get to the numbers that we're using. If you assumed all of that 100 hectares is going to be developable and capable of being used, your actually estimated greenfield area requirement is going to be reduced substantially. So instead of 125 hectares or 159 hectares needed, it would be in like the 60 hectare type range would be needed. So we've overestimated a little bit, but our experience is you need to do that in rural communities such as this. There are some limitations to development on many properties. And just to put this into what Ellen's really focused this slide on is the very first slide you saw in the first table. If we were to compare this to the second table that we looked at and the one that dealt with the intensification target, if we were to consider that intensification target that the county's proposing, the 33% or the 40% intensification, it would take that estimated demand for household from like 1,200 units under the one scenario, probably down in the range of like 600 or 700 units. And it would take that 1,504 units down to somewhere in the neighborhood of under 1,000 units. So it significantly reduces I got that wrong. It would look at the second last column there. It would take the 1,037 unit and reduce that down to about 500. And it would take the 1,321 and reduce it down to like the 600-700 range. So those percentages of those intensification targets are basically cutting the amount of greenfield growth in half. We know that like, we think, and that's another reason why this is a completely, we think, arbitrary 40% number that has no real basis. Everyone at this table knows half of the growth isn't going to occur in the red and half of the growth is in the green. We know that much more is going to occur in the green than the red. That's simply how, the most simple way to.
Yeah.
Just a comment. Is this the way the province is wanting us to more do row housing and one thing after another? So it's a less footprint on a green field, because they won't be, the lawns won't be as big or whatever, just parking spaces and one thing after another. So more row housing is what they're looking for.
That's where the 40%, and I know we're using the 40% number in some different contexts, but the 40 units per hectare that Ellen mentioned was that in order to achieve the 40 units, it's the 40 persons and jobs per hectare, not units, but in order to achieve that 40 persons per hectare, you're going to need a mix of housing styles. You're not going to be able to do it with just singles. You're going to need some towns and some other types of housing. So
That said, I mean, the province is looking at it as a whole, right? They're going to look at it holistically from what they want to achieve. And the larger urban centers in the GTA are going to, from my assumption and what conversations I've had with peers, is going to be higher than the 40. It's going to be more like 50 to 60% in the GTA type areas, Peel, York, the areas that Jamie mentioned earlier. They're going to come in higher than the 40. So when they come in higher than the 40 as an intensification, that's going to help create a balance amongst the province, where some of those denser populated areas are going to come in higher than 40. That will hopefully lean them to be a little bit more lenient for us in the rural side of things, where 40 just isn't achievable. But overall, they've achieved a provincial balance that they would like to see when they created the growth targets.
So are we good to move on to the next slide? There's no real takeaway here. This is more for information purposes about the amount of land that ultimately would be required for green purposes. But there's no real comment that needs to be made, I don't think, to the province or to the county.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and this ties into the estimated land supply that we've completed as part of this exercise too. So if you look at the requirements and you look at what's available in the township, that gives us a sense of existing supply and where additional lands may need to be designated or settlement expansions considered. So from our high level analysis, the existing lands within the greenfield area, which are designated for residential development within that built boundary. My apologies. With the lands that are designated for residential development currently in the county official plan, but which are undeveloped, and that's based on a very high level review and analysis of aerial photographies and site visits, are approximately 44 hectares. Now, if you look at all the greenfield lands, which is that green area on that previous map that was shown, it's about 209 hectares. But the issue here is that they're not necessarily designated at this time for residential development. So if you look at the requirements, even under the highest allocation of population, you're looking at a requirement of approximately 160 hectares needed for residential development to 2051. Now, from our review, there is sufficient land within the existing settlement area of Norwood to accommodate this growth. However, there's not enough lands currently designated for residential development to support this required growth. So that's kind of the takeaway here is through this official plan process, is there a potential to designate more lands for residential development to support that anticipated future growth?
So what Ellen's, just to make that crystal clear, she's saying that within the settlement area boundary, you've got lands that are designated residential that are undeveloped, and there's about 44 hectares of that. But based on that previous table, you need more. You need about 150 plus lands. So as part of the OP review, our recommendation should be that there be additional lands designated residential within the settlement area boundary based on where the current designations lay.
Yeah, and council, just to say, that's why every development that's come forward has had to have an OPA. So every subdivision, Norwood Park Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, now Phase 4, the Mill Street lands, they've all are in the settlement area, but they've all had to start with an official plan amendment first because they weren't designated appropriately. So they're saying to be able to keep it, to do that as part of this exercise. So when a planning application comes forward for a land within the Greenfield area, they don't have to go through that process. The land is already designated. So they don't have to go through an OPA.
They would still go through a public process, through a plan of subdivision application.
Yes, absolutely. And
amendment.
depending on zoning, I don't know what the zoning would be, potentially zoning as well. There would definitely still be a public process. It just wouldn't be an OPA.
Yeah, and the key point there is if you were to break this down in sort of layman's terms, is what we would be asking for here is the county establish the principle of residential use on additional lands that are within the settlement area that are projected to be used for residential purposes over the lifetime of this plan. So let's establish that principle of use now so that a proponent of development doesn't have to go through that added step when they're applying of establishing the principle of development. If I were to put my developer's hat on, developers like that because there's more assurances that yes, this area has already been earmarked for development. It's planned, the principle of use has been established, and it becomes more attractive from that perspective. So that's just that's another recommendation that we think needs to be made as part of this, that the designation of those lands should occur.
So through you, Mayor, to Lori, that was actually my question. That should be part of the one motion, or part of the motion going forward as well, is this piece, correct?
I think your question was more, or sorry, yeah, you're right. It was the other counselor's question related to the give and take. Sorry, my apologies.
And I can tell you that on the mapping, so council, the package that you received a couple of weeks ago, it did include a land use schedule with the proposed mapping for the new OP, and it does have lands that are currently designated maybe rural or non-residential to be called either residential or future development. So the county, it has, I guess, agreed to a certain degree in principle that there is lands within the settlement area that need to be designated differently to support the 160 hectares that are required. So the draft mapping is leaning in that direction, but maybe just solidifying that with the motion today, but we are headed in that direction. I don't think that's going to be an uphill climb to get the county to agree. Sorry, Alan, carry on.
So on that basis, this kind of circles back to that earlier question around, existing settlement area boundaries and potentially lands that are constrained and not suitable for residential development. So from our review, there does appear to be sufficient lands to accommodate the projected growth within the settlement area of Norwood. They're not necessarily designated to support such growth at this time. But really, from our review, should an expansion to the settlement area be pursued, and additional land designated through that official plan update to provide additional options, it is suggested that phasing policies potentially be introduced into the county official plan just to ensure a more orderly progress of development within the township. And likewise, as kind of previously discussed, there are constrained lands within the existing settlement area boundary, and should lands be more appropriate for development, which are currently outside of the boundary, there might be justification around removing those lands and incorporating others as part of a boundary adjustment or settlement expansion on that basis. Jamie, I'm not sure if you have anything to add on that.
What's an example of a constrained land then?
Do you want me to take that, Ellen?
Yeah, sure. It
Could be an environmental feature, could be a large park, for example, like you've got at the north end of the community. Could be a site that's just not able to accommodate development. Could be an aggregate like aggregate lands, those sorts of things. So any kind of development constraint would be something that you could consider swapping out. It doesn't also, it might not even be a constraint. Possibly there's lands that the landowner has no intention of ever developing, that let's say they were a farming family and they intend to use that for at least the lifetime of the official plan or the planning period. Maybe that's somebody that wants their land swapped out. And I'm just giving you some examples. Likely not the case, but those are examples of where we could look at. I think the principle here, if I was to look at it at a high level, is when this plan was drafted and this settlement area boundary was set, it was a number of years ago, and things change over time. And I think what we're saying, is it appropriate to look at that limit that was established historically, and should it be redistributed at all in any manner? Obviously, that can be challenging because people often don't want to see their lands taken out of a settlement area, but there may be public interest items at play that would support that. That the province and the county really aren't looking at removing lands, I don't think, from settlement areas, but if a township is identifying that specifically, yes, we'd rather go in this direction as opposed to that previous direction, I think the OP review is the time to consider that analysis.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So if there's no other comments on the county's growth management piece, I think this is where we kind of shift into the review of the draft official plan. I don't know.
Okay, so you want me to, I'll take over here, Ellen?
Yeah, if you'd like to.
We can swap roles here.
Yeah.
Perfect. So maybe just to summarize what we've got there, there's a couple takeaways that we've got from the previous item. I think there was 3, if I'm not mistaken, Candace. 3 items.
Yes, I have 3 as well.
Okay. So those 3 are the ones that we'll comment on, and maybe we come back to them at the end, unless you want to summarize them right now.
I can quickly summarize them. It's just to communicate back to the county that we support the intensification target of 15%, that we would like to again request that our historical building permit activity drive the allocation from 12% to 15%.
Yeah. And
then mapping principle of use of residential on greenfield in the settlement area. So just ensuring that the hectares of land that we need for development are designated and have the correct land use.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So now on to the official plan update. So the province or the county has been working on their official plan review, and there has been a task force established that various members of the member municipalities have been a part of. I think Ms. White, Mr. Whitmore have been a part of that process. They've provided us with a copy of this draft official plan to review, and that's what's precipitated the second portion of this technical memorandum. Just in terms of, so you understand, Ellen and I, and sort of what we do as well in this context, is that we do provide planning services to a number of municipalities throughout Central Ontario and Northern Ontario, about 12 municipalities. We're currently working on official plan reviews for for 2 municipalities, 2 townships within Simcoe County, another township within the district of the Parry Sound district, and another one up north of North Bay. So I just say that because we do have experience preparing official plans. We have experience working with upper tier approval authorities, particularly in the county of Simcoe, and their official plan documents. So we've tried to bring that experience into some of the comments that we think that the township should be making on the county OP process. So I just wanted to give you a bit of background about what angle we're coming at this from, and some of the different or some of the experience we have in dealing with these official plans. Okay, so just as a background, the current OP was approved by Municipal Affairs in 1994. It's typical now that municipalities update. Historically, it was a 5-year review cycle. The Planning Act changed recently that if you have a new official plan, it's now a 10-year review cycle. And what's important about the official plan here is that it is the primary tool for implementing the county's goals and objectives, but also the township's goals and objectives. Peterborough County is somewhat unique in that county official plan is the official plan that governs land use planning decisions in the lower tier municipalities such as Asphodel-Norwood. You don't have obviously your own official plan, which in other areas of the province, lower tier municipalities do have their own official plan documents, but this does work well, this setup for you. And our real job is to make sure that your interests are being, your specific municipal interests are being captured in this county document. Alan, if you want, perfect. So why is the OP review getting undertaken? First off, the Planning Act requires that update. So there's a statutory obligation to update, and the specific requirements under the Planning Act is that you have to conform with provincial plans. So that provincial plan that you've heard about previously is the growth plan. And as well, it has to be consistent with the provincial policy statement. So both the provincial policy statement and the growth plan have been updated recently, PPS in 2020 and the growth plan in 2020 as well. So they're new documents, so the time's kind of right to undertake an update to the county OP. Ellen's also adding here, it has to have regard to the matters of provincial interest. That's something you probably don't see much of as councillors, but just as sort of an educational piece, under Section 2 of the Planning Act, there's a whole list of matters of provincial interest. There's things in there like affordable housing and orderly development and protection of environmental features. Those are all identified in the Planning Act as matters of provincial interest, and something the OP has to have policies that reference. Again, the county is the approval authority here. And ultimately the township, once this county OP's updated and adopted and comes into effect, the township then has to update its zoning bylaw, and it has 3 years to do that in accordance with the timing requirements of the Planning Act. So you don't have to do it immediately, but you've got 3 years to update your bylaw to ensure that it's in conformity with the OP. And ultimately, that zoning bylaw is the most important planning tool that the municipality has in order to implement the official plan. It sets out your land use permissions, it sets out your permitted uses and standards for development, and really captures and frames your community and how it's to be built. Next slide there, Ellen. So the draft county OP was released in January, so we haven't had a lot of time to review it, but we did take an opportunity again to prepare that memorandum that we're going to work through some of the key components of today, and see if there's any specific comments that this council would like to make at this time. We have provided comments on development applications and land use designations and natural heritage features and resources and transportation. Next slide, Ellen. So I don't know. I think what's probably best if people do have it in front of them, what these next slides do is provide a summary of the memorandum that was prepared. And as Ms. White mentioned at the start of the meeting, much of the time of this meeting would be spent on the table that's at the end of the memorandum. So what these slides do is really work through that table. And we've prepared that table and we've left a column on the right-hand side for council comments. The left-hand column identifies the area of consideration. The middle column is some comments that we've provided. And then the right-hand column has been left for basically to fill in following the discussions that happened today. So I'm just gonna navigate to that myself here. And forgive me if I look off to my right, I've got a second screen here and that's where that document's saved, so.
Jamie, as we start going through the table, probably, and Mayor, just so you're aware, Ed will probably want to just give some comments in certain sections. And I don't know if you can see him or not, Mayor, but just to give you a heads up that as we go through this chart, he may have some comments. So Ed, just unmute yourself and the mayor can't see you. So just start talking. It's okay.
And I'd just like to say, we haven't provided, like this table doesn't deal with every single section in the OP, and it certainly doesn't deal with the growth management section. That's the one that's sort of outstanding. But we've been through it and kind of identified what we think are some of the key things that council might want to look at based on our experience and based on some of the key changes. So it's really a highlight. As you as counselors, if you have time or if you are going through the plan on your own and you have questions or things you think you would like to discuss or bring up, certainly reach out to Candace and we'd be happy to set up a meeting if necessary to talk about those comments that you might like to make individually. So the first area that we wanted to just bring to council's attention, and this isn't a change, but it's the section dealing with plans of subdivision and plans of condominium and ultimately consents. And the current official plan basically says that if you're going to propose to create more than 2 lots, you need to be going through a plan of subdivision process as opposed to a consent process. That number of 2 lots is, I actually found it quite interesting that that number was so low. My experience in other municipalities is that often it's 3 new lots that can be created and stay through consent. And in some cases up to 5 lots that can be created through the consent process before triggering a plan of subdivision.
We would like to see 5, Jamie.
You would like to see 5? Is that sort of common across the board with everybody?
I don't think so. I think it'll probably be unique to Asphodel-Norwood, and Ed has sat in on all of the TAC meetings, so he'll be able to maybe speak more to where the other townships are headed. But we have a scenario right now where someone has a plan of subdivision in for 3 lots for 3 spots, and it's onerous. Takes up a lot of resources. And so, I mean, it's up for council discussion, but township staff would like to see 5. Anything more than 5 units definitely will go through the plan of subdivision process, but anything less than that, we'd like to see just consent.
So maybe I can just provide a brief commentary on what the differences are between the process, because I think it's not fair to ask you to say, do you want 2, do you want 4, 3, do you want 5, without understanding a little bit about what's the difference between consent and plans of subdivision. So firstly, approval authority, whether it, and Candace, you have consent, do you have consent granting authority, or is that with the
County?
County? Okay.
Yeah.
So approval authority, I guess, is not a difference for you. It's the same regardless. With plans of subdivision, once they're draft approved, you typically you can set any time period to draft approve. And what that means is the lots can't be sold with draft approval. You have to register them. So there's a number of conditions that have to be satisfied. So typically they'll set 5 years as a standard, that you have 5 years to satisfy those conditions, but they could set whatever they want. Historically, for consent applications, it was 1 year that you had to satisfy the conditions before it lapsed. However, the province has just changed that, and coming into effect as of January, you now have 2 years to satisfy those conditions of provisional consent. Typically, plans of subdivision are required when there's more detailed agreements necessary between the municipality and between the developer. Like usually plans of subdivision are used if you need to create new roads or if you need to significant infrastructure pieces. But where you're developing on an existing road, where the existing infrastructure is in place, the consent process has all the tools that are necessary. So yeah, my experience again, and I've submitted applications personally for up to 7 lots by consent where it's on an existing municipal road and there's existing infrastructure in place, but it's really municipal dependent. But I have no issues as a professional planner having that number increase to 5 for your municipality.
Just to comment on that, it's like we're hearing from county how busy they are and how swamped they are, and they need more staff in order to look after certain things and one thing after another. I think this is very important for our council to bring this forward, that it's a recommendation basically that we've heard from staff and our consultants now, that this is important for us to go forward with this. And I do realize that building 3 homes on something that's already serviced is not a big deal. So consent only makes sense on a situation like that. So just a thought. Any more, Candace, on that?
Well, just, and Ed may want to chime in here. Ed, was the majority of the other municipalities wanting to stick with the 2?
I think they vary. Like I really just kind of concentrated on Asphodel-Norwood, and because I'm selfish that way, and I'm not thinking of the other townships. So I'm really just totally focused. And so the 5 lots, that would be for the settlement areas. So it's not like, I think that this is not rural or prime ag we're talking. This would be in the settlement areas.
Yeah, just to be clear, this isn't a section that would say you can create 5 lots now from any parcel of land. There's separate policies in the OP that deal with how many lots can actually be created from a parcel. To be clear, this is just saying which process do you go through if you're creating more than 5 or less than 5 or more than 2 or less than 2. And to be clear, if there's a situation where someone is, like, let's say the less than the 5 lots is what's landed on, and that becomes part of the county OP. That's not to say if there isn't a development proposal that is extending a road and creating a situation of 5 lots that are on a new road, that the county can't require a subdivision, or the approval authority can't require a subdivision in that case. This is just providing the opportunity to proceed through the consent process for up to 5 lots. But through pre-consultation, there can be a requirement to go through the subdivision process. I think that's a key here.
It is. And I think that even if the county doesn't want to blanket it, there is opportunity. You'll see it throughout the draft OP that you have, where certain municipalities have a clause or a special provision in there for them specifically. So if the county has been amenable to that in the past, so if some of the other townships want to stick to 2, but Norwood wants to go to 5, there is an opportunity for them to not have a blanket approach to this provision, that they could say, 2 lots, except in Asphodel-Norwood, 5 lots, or except for these 2 municipalities, 5 lots. So I think that's what we would be asking them to consider, is to have if they want to stick with the 2 lots in the OP, to have a special provision in there that there's a local policy for Asphodel-Norwood that is for 5 lots.
Yeah, we have a few dead end roads in our village and one thing after another that way that are part of our settlement area that could take advantage of something like that easily. And the biggest part of this is the province wants to get rid of red tape in order to open up and make it easier for people to build homes for people to live in. So, I mean, we have an argument even from the province to say, like, enough with the red tape, let's move on. Thank you.
Does council have any issues with the 5 lots?
Through you, Mayor, Lori, that's Lori. No, none whatsoever. It makes perfect sense to move it from 2 to 5. And yeah, when you go through the official plan, you do see there's a number of areas where it certainly is up to townships and hopefully provisions can be made. So this is, in my opinion, certainly one of them. And now you clarified it that it's within the settlement area, not on rural or agricultural lands. I think that's, one of the main takeaways for us as council to understand that. So I'm certainly in favor of the 2 to 5.
We're not looking for a motion at this time, but is there any other member of council that may have concerns about this at this time?
Through you, Mayor, it's Councillor Walsh. No, I'm aligned with what the deputy mayor said. We're talking in the settlement area. So again, if it's help from the standpoint of removing some red tape and moving the process along faster, the county's still going to be involved in the process because we use their, so I don't have a problem moving to 5.
Okay, thank you. Carry on.
I'm making one last note here.
I think in some of the townships, like Duro Dummer, possibly they may already be at 5 severances in the rural area because they don't have any built up areas, or they only have some very small hamlets, but not serviced areas. I mean, so it's all over the board for depending on what township you're in. Asphodel-Norwood too.
All right, so just moving on to the next section that deals with consents. So this is the one that establishes the limitations on how many consent applications are allowed for property, or what lots are eligible. And currently the provision is that there be a maximum of 2 consents from a land holding. And the land holding is defined as what the lot existed 5 years prior to that date of the application. Is there any concerns with that section at all?
Just a comment. So when you're saying 2 consents from a land holding, we're talking in the rural area then. So if somebody has a space that they have to wait basically a 5-year period before they can actually apply again for something. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, that's the way this section's structured. I will tell you that this is a very permissive policy in terms of my experience. For example, in Simcoe County, in most of the municipalities, you're eligible for 1 lot if you have 100 acres of land. Like, that's the only instance. If you have 40 acres of land, there's no severances for you. Where this policy is, I would say, fairly permissive in terms of what I've seen in other locations.
Right. And just to follow up on that though, but county's still involved in this, no matter how we look at it. And that's not a bad thing in some cases, because some lands where the people would like a laneway aren't necessarily would comply with how road safety is concerned, and one thing after another. So when you have to think about it, you still have lots of rules and regulations you have to go through in order to comply with where you want your lot, basically.
Certainly, like if there's environmental features, like agricultural lands, for example, there's no rural severances on except for a surplus farm dwelling. So all those are off the table. So you're really limited to lands outside of a settlement area that are designated rural is really where you're focused here. So I just wanted to raise that's something that's in the plan, that wanted to just confirm with council that they don't have any comments on that.
Yeah, and it is a big change from what is in our current OP, just so council is aware. It isn't currently 5 years. I believe it's 1983. Ed is the year, so it is
1983 is current.
1983 is the current. So it's a big change.
So this will open up a lot more lots for potential rural lot creation in comparison to what the current plan is.
Right.
And
I doubt we'll see a lot just because we have so much agriculture here, but like we're predominantly agriculture, which opens up a whole other conversation. But for those lots that it takes away the 1983 date was too restrictive from a staff perspective. 1983. Ed, do you know why that year was chosen?
I
We've
have
talked
no
about
idea.
this and we can't figure it out.
I have no idea why they put that in back then.
94, they put 1983 in there. We're not really sure. We've tried to figure that out. So, but just wanted council to be aware, it isn't 5 years now, it's 1983.
I just have a question, it's Lori, for clarification. So this is on rural designated land only. And is there a minimum acreage for these two consents or no?
Not in the official plan. And again, it's not specific to rural designated lands only. I think I was just providing an example that there's other designations where you just can't create residential lots. But so this is in the rural area. It's the general, which the lands outside of a settlement area. This document doesn't specify land holding size, but the zoning bylaw does. You need to meet the minimum lot size requirements that are outlined in the zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
And it could be for commercial, it could be for industrial lands outside. It could be, there's possibly other zoning lands in the township in the rural area as well. And they still would have to go through a consent process that the township would have to be agreeable to. It would have to definitely make sense. And for us to make the recommendation for it to be passed to the county, it's not just if you've owned the land or the parcel has existed for at least 5 years that it's a given you're allowed 2 severances. It's definitely not a given. It just makes it more eligible that some of the parcels that have been severed in the past after 1983 may be looked at again. You know, there may be, I should have had some examples for you, is that a parcel of land that's commercial out there in the rural area. And maybe they want to have 2 businesses compared to just 1 business type of thing. But anyways, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, I just have one more question. I guess this is for Ed and Candace. From a staff perspective, do you see this as a good forward step for development, especially when it comes to job creation and perhaps commercial development or that sort of thing?
Yes, and I think it is permissive. I'm going to agree with Jamie. It is quite permissive, where we were very restrictive before. But I do feel just based with the land fabric and the land uses we have, this policy is going to accomplish exactly that. That's what we're trying to have it accomplish, which is some of those commercial pockets in the rural area, some of the landowners that have maybe had a property severed since 1983 shouldn't be restricted that they can't now get a further severance. There is opportunities out there that are being lost that this policy will correct. That said, it isn't going to just be a carte blanche. It has to make sense. It has to be good planning. It has to follow all of the other planning provisions. It isn't just an automatic. It isn't just a given. So that's important to remember. Ed will probably speak to it a little bit more. He's quite passionate about this specific policy. So
What it also does is change it, like right now, say the lot was created after 1983. So what it will do is you will not have to go through an official plan amendment to grant you permission of that 1983 date. So it just stops the official plan amendment is really what it does. And so that to me is less red tape.
Yeah.
And it is helpful, but again, it has to be good planning and it has to make sense. It's not just because you own a piece of land that complies with the date or the year. And it is a moving because it is a 5 years prior to the date of the application. So that date continually moves. It means more work for the township, which again is good for the township. Like, it's more work for staff, and I welcome more work. It's good for the township to always be moving forward instead of being stuck in 1983.
Yeah.
In my
Thank
mind.
you.
All right, so let's move forward. If there's no one that has any concerns with the way it's currently in the OP, then that's just keep moving. So the next area of discussion relates to the agricultural designation. Just a few points I wanted to raise on page 68 of the draft OP, and it's at section 4122. These are the policies that apply to, again, the agricultural designation. And item A says lot creation in the agricultural designation is generally discouraged and may only be permitted in accordance with section 3.5 of the plan. And that, which is the previous section we just went through. I only raise this because I think it'll result in the way it's currently drafted, I think will result in some confusion with residents. Is that the provincial policy is very clear that new lot creation for residential purposes is not allowed in prime agricultural areas, and your agricultural designation basically defines your prime ag area. So I'm just, by saying it's generally discouraged, I'm not sure that's the right wording, and maybe you council disagrees with that, but I'm just raising it as a planner of an area that I don't think is consistent with the PPS, and I think would confuse residents. And but I'll kind of, if council has any comments on that, I'd be happy to hear them, and I'm fine if you don't want to say anything about that section too.
I have a question, basically. So just for instance, if in today's world, there's nobody can afford anything out there in the real, like, farms are going for $1 million, one thing after another now out there. But if, say, for instance, one farm had 200 acres on it with one house, say, but they wanted to segregate 100 acres off of that farm for a future settlement for their children or grandchildren or something like that, are you saying to me that that extra 100 acres now couldn't take on a house?
If it's all one lot right now, if it's a 200-acre lot and it's all designated agriculture, the PPS will not allow you to sever that land. Unless, sorry, let me just correct that. If your minimum lot area is 100 acres, for example, in the zoning bylaw, then you could sever it and have 2 agricultural lots, each of 100 acres. You could do that. You couldn't do a severance to have a 198 hectare lot and a 2 hectare lot though, but you could have 2 agricultural lots, each of 100 acres.
But on that extra 100 acre lot, or would they be able to build a home or not?
Yep.
Okay,
Because
thank you.
a dwelling's an accessory use to an agricultural use, so that's why.
Because I do think there's a lot of places out there that have a lot of acreage, and I think in today's world that you're going to find that they can't afford to buy something for their children, but they can afford to sever some property for their kids in order to go forward. And I think that's where we're going to end up in the future here for not just Asphodel-Norwood, but all over. So.
Okay.
And I think, Jamie, where we run into is the prime ag mapping. There is definitely farmers and agricultural properties in the township where they have sections of their farm that haven't been workable land or farm for years, whether it's wooded, whether just topographically doesn't make sense, whatever it may be. And they want the opportunity to be able to build a house on that for the next generation. And we hear that a fair bit. And it seems that the PPS is kind of it's a hard stop, hard no with no gray area. And unfortunately, the world's not black and white. And we want generational farming. We want sustainability in the agricultural community. And this, I know that the intent of this is to preserve ag land, but I think in some ways it's making it handcuffs it on the other side of the coin, where they're not able, where the prime egg mapping, sometimes it's mapped prime egg, but the farmer's looking at it as like, there's just no way, I'm not farming this. I want to take that corner off and I want it to be a house and I want my son to live in it. So they can't afford to live somewhere else based on what the mayor's saying. And they're the next generation that's going to take on the farm, but I'm not ready to leave the farm and I don't want to give them my house. So that's kind of when we have 75% of our land agriculture, that is a conversation that is had quite regularly in the Asphodel-Norwood boundary. And it's hard to find how to solve that and how to make that work for a generational farming family. Do you have any, and I think that's what lent to this language at the county level, that it's discouraged versus just a carte blanche no. So when there's an opportunity such as that, where there's a challenge to the prime egg mapping, and that scenario exists, just as I stated, that there could potentially be an opportunity for that generational farming family to continue versus just selling it for $1.2 million from someone from outside of the area that's not going to farm it. And that's, I guess, the historical conversation.
My recommendation is that you can leave the language the way it is, but my recommendation is you need to take a really hard look at that agricultural system mapping that's been prepared. And I know that the township has provided some refinements to that. You need to take a really hard look at that and make sure you've excluded the areas that should be excluded, and confirm that there aren't any more that should be excluded. And you need to take a really hard look at the agricultural rural mapping in the county OP, because once something's designated agricultural in the county OP, then that kicks it into the prime ag area policies of the PPS applying, which are very, very restrictive in terms of residential lot creation, where the rural policies aren't so much. So
basically you're saying, don't worry, don't try to solve it with the language.
You have to solve it with
in the mapping. And we can, there hasn't been I guess a whole lot of flexibility given to us, and Ed, you may be able to speak to this based on the conversation that's at the TAC, but my understanding is they're not really allowing us to do that. Like, we've made some recommendations, but I mean, we would almost have to go through this maybe line by line, like 5th line, 4th line, 3rd line, and kind of go through it.
My recommendation to municipalities is to do that, because this is your one chance you get. Like, if they're gonna come to the counter and say, I want to sever, I've got this piece in the back 40, or I've got this piece that's not good for agricultural uses, I don't use it for agricultural, it's really rural. And you're going to say, well, it's designated ag, like it's prime ag, I can't help you. So it's kind of like it's a refinement exercise. Like the map, like now mapping matters more than ever is what I'm saying, because of the policies that are in place. So I know it's an arduous exercise and I know it's time consuming, but
no, it's totally worth it at the end of the day.
I just have sorry, are you done, Candace?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just have a comment on that. Unfortunately, there is extended mapping going on, and it was not done for this OP exercise. So it is ongoing through a MAFRA, but it won't be done for a while. So that's unfortunate that it wasn't done before this is coming into play. And when it comes to agriculture, I just want everyone to know, and certainly Candace and Ed, on the 21st of February, Monday night, the Peterborough Federation of Agriculture has paid a consultant, a planner, to take a look at the new county OP draft, more from just the agricultural perspective. And so there will be a review of that, just for information purposes for the agricultural community. And again, that's Monday night, and I'll send that information and the link to Candace, and she can send that out. And I think there'll be some we'll see where that goes, but it's going to look a lot at the mapping, the OFDUs, that sort of thing. So it will be interesting to see what comes forth on that. Not that we can do a lot of changes, but from an agricultural standpoint, they can also make comments the same way we are. So, and certainly there may not be decisions made, but I think it might be a good thing to take part in on the 21st. So just letting you know about that.
Lori, have they identified any huge concerns?
I
that
haven't-
triggered them hiring their own consultant?
Basically that was put forth from this kind of went back to the OFDU that OSM, so Tonabee South Monaghan, put forth in the summer.
Yeah.
And there were a group that had some concerns. And anyway, long story short, there were 4 people who went to the county who kind of late in the game for the OP that were able to take part and talk to TAC members and talk to Brian and that sort of thing. So they went back to Peterborough Federation of Agriculture because they're the ones that have the most money from an agricultural standpoint group in the county. And because none of these people who were in discussion with the county, they're not planners, they don't live in that world, but they had some concerns. And I think quite frankly, a lot of it is around the mapping, what you just discussed. So I haven't seen the report that is coming forward on Monday, and I won't until Monday. So I really can't answer that question other than I think the mapping is a big thing. And like you said, there's some land that is considered prime agricultural and you can't put a tractor on it. So I think what Jamie said, for municipalities to go through almost line by line and refine it, that almost sounds like the answer to the agricultural designation.
So just to
But
touch
our
on
time
that,
is tight.
it is the on-farm diversified uses. So will they be making recommendations as a blanket county-wide that they would like to see?
I don't. When you look at the OFDUs in the OP, like it looks pretty good. The one thing that came out of that meeting that was really important was they wanted for anybody with the on-farm diversified use to have a farm business registration number, and that was not in the OSM OFDU. So that was important. And in the draft for the agricultural end of it, they did put that in, even though you don't have to, but they did put that in. I think from a planner perspective, that may not be necessary, but they did put that in. So that was one of the main concerns around it. They didn't want somebody coming from the city, buying their 100 acres of land and starting some sort of a business and they're not a farmer. So they can still start a home-based business, but with the ag-related uses and the on-farm diversified uses, I think they just wanted some more clarification around that. So again, I haven't seen the report, so it'll be interesting to see what comes out on the 21st.
Okay, thank you,
Go
Ed.
ahead, Ed.
When the county looked at the existing mapping and then the proposed mapping, it's more or less the changes were like from the aerial views. If it looks like a farm, if it looks like fields and it's not a forest type of thing, then it was designated as agricultural. And like as staff, it's a tough spot to be in because I'm for growth and everything else, but I'm more for protecting farmland. So I am, and the agricultural land that we need to protect. So to me, I didn't disagree with them. If it looked like a farm from the aerial view and they wanted to change it from rural to agricultural, I didn't disagree with them. So I didn't. And the province or different rules and regulations for looking at it. They don't want pockets of, like, it's painted with the big brown brush that this is all prime agricultural. And yeah, there's existing residential lots, and there's smaller size lots, and there's water courses or creeks and rivers that run through the prime agricultural lands and stuff, and it's painted green. They didn't want to single out this residential lot as being residential. They left it as prime agriculture because it's in prime agriculture, and it's just a designation. Even though in our zoning bylaw, it says that it's a rural residential lot, the designation in the official plan is actually prime agriculture. And it really doesn't change anything in the long run. It just means, I guess, possibly for farm severances, the only farm severances permitted is surplus dwellings. And I was at the TAC meeting where the Federation of Agricultural, there was 2 or 3 different speakers. And, one lady was, we want to see large prime agricultural parcels of land, pretty much only. So 40 hectares and greater, 100 acres and greater. And somewhere, like somebody even said something about 400 acres in size would be like a nice minimum size of a farm. And there was another lady speaking that was like, we need diversified farm sizes for beginner farmers. We need parcels of land that would be much smaller in size, like 10 acres to 20 acres in size, or 50 acres in size, so that beginner farmers can start with a farm and allow more farming people to become farmers, or other people to become farmers, compared to a monopoly of you have to be this really big farm parcel of land in order to become a farmer type of thing, because it's just priced out of reach for somebody trying to start out as a farmer. And maybe they have a specialty crop, and they listed a number of specialty crops that they do not need to have these giant parcels of land. And so I'm in favor 100%, and I don't know how we'll ever achieve it, but we need to have diversified prime agricultural parcels of land. They shouldn't all have to be a minimum of 100 acres. If somebody has 150 acres and they do a severance and end up with 100 acres and a 50-acre parcel, that 50 acres could actually, somebody could buy that, or a family member could buy that and start out their own. Or if there's a 25-acre parcel of land, that may be more than enough that's required for their specialty crop. And there's still a farmland. It's protecting farmland, and it's creating jobs, and it's just better planning to me. But the mapping was looked at, and that's how the mapping has changed. We didn't look at the soil. In the olden days, prime ag was always classified by the soil class, and then rural didn't meet the prime agricultural class. And so that's why it was designated rural. But now it's, if it looks like a farm, it's a farm, like from the air, from aerial views. And I don't know how else you would do it from a township staff perspective. Like, how do you actually tell whether that's it looks like it's a farm. It looks like they're growing either soy, or they're growing cow corn, or they're growing something on there, or maybe it's hay or something else to support animals. But
I think we would have to look and see if there was like treed or wooded or very obvious sections of the farms that were not being farmed.
Yes,
And
and there
that would
is.
be the only thing that we could visually see. I mean, if it's actively growing a crop, it shouldn't be designated anything but agriculture on the mapping. But if it's a section of the farm that isn't growing an active crop, then it shouldn't be zoned prime ag.
It shouldn't be
Ah.
designated prime ag, but they won't let us remove those wooded areas from prime ag.
Why? Who won't?
I think that it's provincial driven. Like on how to show, like that's why residential lots are designated prime ag as well.
Jamie, do you
Because
have a
it's in a
comment
prime,
on that for the mapping? Like if we can't, that's exactly what I was talking about, was that wooded area is what a farmer would want to sever off in order to, for the generational farming scenario I gave. So if we go on the mapping, but what Ed is saying that the province won't allow us to remove that wooded area off that, is that correct? Then it's kind of a moot point to go through the mapping.
So it depends on scale, is that, and I'll start at the micro scale first. If you have a property with like a woodlot, for example, that abuts a road that's surrounded by ag land on all the sides of it, you're not going to be able to take that woodlot and call it rural. They're gonna continue that the agricultural designation will continue across that. If you've got, let's say, a large swath of wooded area that encompasses a number of properties, there could be a potential that area may be more appropriately designated something other than agriculture. But if we're just talking about like small pieces on,
Yeah, it would be like couple
individual-
acre parcels.
yeah, that's not going to happen. And so that's at the micro scale. Just on the macro scale, and why that's the case is that agriculture, and we're getting kind of into the weeds here, but agricultural lands in the province is, from the PPS perspective, there's two key distinctions. There's a thing called prime agricultural areas, and there's a thing called prime agricultural lands. Prime agricultural lands are lands where class 1 to 3 soils predominate. So that's the soil classification Ed was talking about. So and then prime ag areas are areas where that encompass agricultural lands, but also more than that. So for example, you're allowed to have, as Ed mentioned, you could have residential lots that are part of that prime ag area. You could have wood lots that are part of the quote unquote prime ag area. But from a designation perspective, what I think you want to do is, and maybe Ed's already done this by the sounds of it, and maybe it just needs one more check on it, but you do want to make sure that you've, to the greatest extent, refined where your limits of the agricultural lands are. Because it does one of two things. Firstly, it ensures that you are protecting the most important agricultural lands, first and foremost, to Ed's point. So that's item one. And item two is that it's ensuring that lands that aren't used for farming or aren't appropriate to be used for farming in the future are afforded the opportunity for other land uses, if that's the case. So
But it has to be land parcel by land parcel, not sections of land, not sections of a parcel. So the mapping won't go through necessarily through, like you can't take off that corner lot like you were just saying. So really there's not much we can do.
Not unless it's contiguous with a larger, like if it's contiguous with something larger, then it could buy property.
Right.
But if just gonna try to take little pieces out of every property, no, that's not appropriate.
Okay, so really in certain scenarios, we may not be able to assist a landowner in our township that has that scenario that I mentioned by the sounds of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only thing that you can do
bad.
and that the province allows for is the additional unit piece. Like I know that doesn't give people what they want, which is their own parcel of land, but the additional unit piece is a bit of an opportunity that wasn't there historically.
Yeah.
Can you just expand upon that, Jamie, what you mean by additional use?
Additional unit, certainly.
Unit.
So the Planning Act, as you know, or as you likely know, was updated to allow for additional dwelling units on a residential property. The Planning Act requires municipalities to allow for additional dwelling units in single attached dwellings, semi-detached, and row houses. It's up to the municipalities then to decide whether they want to put some rules around it and specific location requirements. It requires you to allow them in single detached dwellings or in dwellings and accessory buildings. So now what the Planning Act says is you can have a dwelling unit and up to 2 additional units per property. So 2 units, 2 basement apartments, 2 units above a detached, or you can have 1 unit above a detached garage and 1 as a basement apartment, for example. But you can have 2 additional units per property. So if I was, what I have seen in agricultural situations is somebody might build a driving shed and build a 2nd unit attached to that driving shed, and that's where their parents live, or that's where, or their kids live, or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's got to be part of that, attached to that unit. So there is some opportunities to do those sorts of things that weren't available historically. The caveat is that you can't, typically, you're not allowed to have that somewhere else on the property. Like you can't have the dwelling in one location and a 2nd unit somewhere else. Really got to be part of the farm cluster, like where the house and where the barn and the amenities are. So.
And we've already went through that process to allow 2nd dwelling units on almost every type of property in our township. So if somebody wants a 2nd dwelling, and most of our zonings allow a semi-detached dwelling. So if you have an existing farmhouse now and you want to build an attached house to it and turn that into like a semi-detached house, you can do that. If you wanted to have a 2nd dwelling unit for a family member, or just for whatever purpose you want a 2nd dwelling unit on your property, currently we can do that in Asphodel-Norwood. We were not as restrictive as a lot of the townships, because for whatever purpose, if it meant that the 2nd dwelling unit is 200 feet away or 300 feet away from the main dwelling, just possibly that the kids or whoever want privacy, or that's where the land is most appropriate for that 2nd dwelling unit, that it doesn't take away from the actual farming land, or you don't want to be listening to the TV of your elderly parents or something because they have it cranked up too loud, or whatever the reason is. We were not as restrictive. You still have to comply with all setbacks and all the rest of it, but some townships were it has to be connected to the same septic system. It has to be connected to the same well, or to the same whatever, or within 100 feet or within 50 feet of the existing dwelling unit. And we were not that restrictive, because not all properties are that way. And so so far we're getting a few 2nd dwelling units now. It's more and more becoming more familiar with a handful every year now, and it's good.
I think we can carry on now. Thanks.
All right, that was a good.
So just so I'm aware, are we gonna make a recommendation to leave we're going to not discourage? Are we going to make
I think what I
comment
heard was
county?
just leave it as is.
Leave it as is. Okay. So no comment. And then the on-farm diversified uses, I think we need to probably have a conversation. Did council have anything about on-farm diversified uses? Was everyone okay with that section? I mean, staff was okay. I mean, it was a lot of it. We felt the OPA was really starting to get into local policy and really getting into zoning and site plan control bylaws. Like they were really honing in. We felt it was a bit more in the weeds, as Jamie likes to say, or detailed than what the OPA generally is for uses. I think that's probably being sparked by the agricultural community, but a lot of the provisions in it, traditionally, we would dictate through our own zoning or site plan control bylaws. But they're dictating it at the OPA level or OP level. So Ed, do you have anything you want to talk to council about on farm diversified uses for a staff level for comments? Because we had a few the other day.
Yes. with a on-farm diversified use, like until it is presented to us, we don't actually know how much detail that we're going to require. And so every scenario is going to be a little bit different. And so if we think that it's appropriate to go through site plan control, council has the authority, if staff recommends that this be subject to site plan control for whatever the reasons are, and of course, there would be reasons attached to why we think it should go through site plan control, then council has the prerogative of making that a condition of that diversified use of going through site plan control. But we don't want every scenario to have to go through site plan control. We don't want to have to go through a zoning bylaw amendment. We're not, the reason that diversified uses are allowed is so that you don't have to go through all that red tape, and that you can create a small business, 2% of your property or less, to support your farm. So I'm in favor of less restrictions and not having to go through site plan control and zoning or the rest of it, and let council and staff decide whether or not it's appropriate. You know, if somebody wants to, like way out on the person built a garage out on, what was it? I don't know if it was County Road 2 or the third line. There's a rural garage out on the property. They had to go through a zoning bylaw amendment and all that in order to have it. There's no houses nearby them. There's no concerns with it. Well, today that would be treated as a diversified use, that they would be permitted to go through that. We would still probably make them go through site plan control just to show, or else a development agreement just to show where, show me your parking, show me your garbage, show me where your compound area is, show me this, show me that. And then so that it's not an eyesore from the road. We want to make sure everything, is neat and tidy. But I think that having the OP specify when and where site plan control is required, depending on whether, whether certain townships want to go in that route, they can. But I don't think that it should be our direction. It should be up to our council and our staff to determine whether or not it should go through site plan control.
Or a zoning bylaw amendment.
Yeah, or a zoning bylaw amendment.
It gets
I don't think
dictating it out of the gate.
Yeah, and I don't think.
I think, Ed, what you're saying is take the site plan control reference out of the OP and let the township site plan control bylaw prescribe when and where you're going to apply site plan control.
Right.
You are stealing the words right out of my mouth. That was my next sentence.
Just for an example, I sit on planning through the county, and a few things like this has come up for diversified. So they wanted to have a wedding venue at a barn. So it was near a county road, but some of their problems was the car count that they were worried about, and one thing after another for plugging off the road if there was certain places for the cars to park, and then they thought about busing them from a certain area and whatever. It was a really brutal, in-depth thing, and then they were even talking about putting stoplights there because somebody's wanting to put something diversified in order to cover their costs for the amount of taxes that were going up on certain things because they weren't farming it anymore. So I mean, I'm in agreement. I think some of the common sense stuff needs to be pulled away from the county, that our staff are educated and so is our council, that we're not going to allow somebody to do something that's going to put people in harm's way. So I'm in agreement with what the recommendation is. So any other thoughts from council?
That makes sense.
I've got one more comment for the on-farm diversified uses for that, like a wedding venue. They were under no circumstances will there be any like overnight accommodations. And so that means if you want to have overnight accommodations for a wedding venue, and I think that it's a great idea and I may be the only person out there that this is a great idea to have overnight accommodations. You could have a little honeymoon suite You know, you can have, and what harm is it going to be? It's going to create income for that farm. It's going to be built according to the Ontario Building Code. It's going to be safe. It's going to have the proper septic system through permits and approvals. I don't think that the OP should be that designated, and it can be for the rest of them, but I think just for Asphodel-Norwood, I don't think that it's accommodation should be prohibited. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me to go into that much detail.
Well, again, wouldn't the local policies drive it? I don't know why they're tackling some of this in the OP. I mean, zoning may address it. I would assume they're automatically forcing a zoning bylaw amendment, refusing overnight accommodations, and not allowing the local municipality to have its local policies. I would just like to see some of this go back to, the language is very restrictive for an OP. Traditionally, they don't get this detailed. I would like to see it come back to local policy.
So I think what I'm hearing is that more permissive and more in line with what the provincial policies and guidelines require. So just so everybody's clear, is that the provincial policy statement does permit on-farm diversified uses in rural and agricultural areas. And the provincial policy statement, I might get this wrong, I'm going from memory here. I did have a big hearing on this exact issue. So I think what it says is, it says that on-farm diversified uses have to be limited in scale and they can't hinder the surrounding agricultural uses. So the way it controls scale is two ways, and this is dictated through the guidelines that the province has produced. And that's where you get the minimum one or the maximum 1 hectare of area, and there's maximums in terms of building sizes, and the guidelines tell you that you should try to make use of existing buildings that are underutilized for these sorts of uses and not use agricultural lands that are being used for farming purposes. But that stuff's already in the provincial policy statement. Those requirements are already in the guidelines that the province has produced. So I think what I'm hearing is generally make some comments that scale back the prescriptiveness of what the OP has included for this item, and keep it open, and that we think the provincial documents provide sort of sufficient levels of control on this issue that we can implement through an application by application basis.
Agreed. And if we want to further restrict it when we redo our zoning bylaw or put some other things, we'll deal with it there. Or if something happens in the site plan control bylaw, local policies can, address anything outside of the provincial policy statement if there is a certain aspect of the application that we want to address.
Yeah, so just to bring that, just make sure everybody's clear on that, sorry for interrupting, is that what'll happen now is that when you update your zoning bylaw, you'll have to make a decision. Are we gonna describe some permitted uses that are allowed as on-farm diversified uses as of right, without a zoning bylaw amendment? Like, are we gonna allow for those? Or are we just gonna make it that any on-farm diversified use has to go through a zoning amendment and there's a planning process associated with it? That's really what we're talking, what
Exactly.
will end up happening. And you have to make that decision now, but you'll have to make that decision in the future.
And I think that's where the conversation needs to be had, is at our local zoning with our council, not at the county OP level.
Yeah, like what this is doing is this is setting policies to evaluate those future applications for zoning amendment, and what do we have to consider? And I think what I'm hearing is that we don't want to trigger an OPA ever for an on-farm diversified use. We think the provincial documents do, and the provincial documents provide enough guidance for us to evaluate a zoning amendment for an on-farm diversified use. That's, I think, what we're saying here. That some of these things get
what I'm saying. I don't know if council agrees, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'll just make a comment. Yeah, I agree. And you just look at the diversity of the county geographically and what it's made up of. Every township is a little bit different. So I think it's important that every township has the ability to move forward in a way that's going to work for them. And I find it interesting when Ed was mentioning about an overnight stay, if there was an event venue and having a, a small yurt or whatever it would be, a small building for overnight stays. And when you look at PCAD and what they're trying to do and do ag tourism and culinary tourism, and they're worried about, we simply do not have enough of those overnight farm stay accommodations, and they're really promoting that. So it's almost like one policy goes against another, and they're fighting off one another. So it's a complicated situation, but anyway, that's just a comment, not a question.
Yes, and I just wanted to add one thing too, is that there's lots of municipalities that they're happy with having the language that's being proposed. And I would just like to have, a sentence in the various sections that say, except in Asphodel-Norwood. That's all. Like we will be dealing with it differently than the rest of the townships, because some of the townships are like that they have their own little clauses for OSM or whatever township you're in. And it would be nice for us to have our own little sentences in the various sections as well, that like we don't need everybody to, all the other townships to go along with whatever we say. Like they make up their own decisions for themselves, just like we are trying to make our own decisions for Asphodel-Norwood. So those
I have a
comments.
question. So those comments, do they have to be part of the draft, or can it just go in as excluding Asphodel-Norwood, or do you have to have the details in the draft OP? I'm just unsure about that.
I would suggest that the direction that we're going to get from council today is that it's not the specific wording. I think you're telling us that you'd like some refinements made to it to make it a little bit more permissive, to not trigger an OPA for these things.
Mhm.
Then you leave it to us and staff to craft those comments. But I'm going to suggest, if you're going to complain about something, you got to offer solutions. So you got to give them what you think it should say for our municipality.
Okay.
Yeah, we will. I think we need to, we'll have to go through it and I guess be a bit, this is what we want for Asphodel-Norwood. And
Yeah. So I
Okay.
think there's an item there's a takeaway point here that if council wants us to look at, I think the response is refinements to that section to allow for it to be a little bit more permissive, and you leave it to staff to do that.
Yes, and this is a county official plan, but it's also Asphodel-Norwood's official plan. And so we will have our own sentences throughout the document.
Yeah, I just can't stress enough, we're open for business. I mean,
Yeah,
and any business is a good business as far as I'm concerned, because it could bring in extra people to work, and once they're here working, they're going to live. So, I mean, you have to be smart about it too. And we haven't done anything that hasn't been smart as far as council's concerned with staff behind us. So I think we're doing the right thing, but I don't think having county overstep by making this cut and dried line on their items is not the right way to go. So.
No, and through you, Mayor, just reiterate the same thing. We have redeemed that we're open for business. And I think we have enough smarts and controls in our system with our staff to really be able to look at any opportunity that comes along. And when you look at the OP, if you're somebody thinking I might want to try this, it looks so restrictive that you're going to kill people before they get out of the gate with potentially an opportunity that may be, very rewarding for them and us.
All right, so let's move on. We skipped over agricultural related uses, but I don't think, from my perspective, there's not any comments that need to be made there. It's fairly standard what's been provided related to that. And just so everybody's clear what the difference between an ag related use and a non-farm diversified use are, is that an ag-related use has to relate to agriculture. So things like farm gate sales, for example, or it could be a business that sells agricultural equipment, for example, that's ag-related. On-farm diversified doesn't have to be related to agriculture at all. It could be an industrial use, it could be a commercial use of any kind, but it has to be limited in scale. The whole purpose is that it's secondary to that agricultural operation, and the purpose is that it allows the farmer to diversify their income. But that's the two differences between those two. Ag-related uses also, they can be principal uses on a property, where on-farm diversified need to be secondary uses on the property. All right, just wanted to clarify that point because a lot of people don't really know the difference. I think the next place we were going to look at was the cannabis stuff under this. And I'm not that familiar with how this came to be in the official plan, and Ed, maybe you are, or maybe Candace is, but has the county done a site-specific, or not a site-specific OPA, but did they do an OPA to insert these cannabis policies previously, or are these brand new?
They have amended their official plan to allow like the provincial guidelines or whatever it was that was handed down to us. And then we've implemented our zoning bylaw as well. And we've also amended our site plan control bylaw.
Okay. So there's nothing really we need to review again on this. It's you've done that, been there, done that kind of thing on this. I just wanted to, I didn't know if it was new or not. That's why I added it to the list. So.
I think we're okay unless council has something. Our zoning bylaw and site plan control bylaw are working, so.
Okay, yeah, as I mentioned, we were a little bit strapped for time, so I didn't get to compare what was in the previous plan to this one. We were really just focused on this document, so.
That's okay.
Where are we here? So I think the next one, rural designation.
Yeah, staff has no comments. The 2 lots by consent was fine with us unless council has anything.
Let's carry on to the next one then.
Okay, so the next one is the employment designation.
Just want council to know that that replaces industrial in our current OP. That's the new land use designation. You won't see industrial anymore. You'll see employment.
Well, just a comment, then employment from industrial, that opens it up a little bit better for us in order to encourage more people to come to do something different other than having it industrialized. Is that right?
It'll be commercial. Commercial is also employment lands, commercial and industrial. Or at least in my mind, commercial is employment lands, and I don't know if it is in anybody else's, but whenever I think of employment lands, I always think of like commercial and industrial lands.
But we still have a commercial designation under the OP though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but industrial is gone.
Just another comment on that, permits for indoor cannabis growing. Could there not be something there too for, you know, how we missed out on some vertical farming or something like that? Could it not be part of that too, if somehow, like, that's employment too, right?
Vertical farming could be permitted in the rural and agricultural areas as well.
Right.
Like if we wanted to build a building on a farm and do that, I would give you a permit today for it.
But could you not do it in the employment designation area too?
I think so.
Yeah, I just wonder if that should be highlighted in there too of some sort. So that way we're covered.
It does say one of the permitted uses listed under on page 76 on page 4151. It does say agriculturally related uses are permitted. Processing and storage of agricultural commodities. And then at the end, it talks about the indoor cannabis cultivation and processing. So I think what you're saying is that it should allow for, it doesn't specifically say cultivation and growing of other agricultural products. It's very specific to cannabis. So I think you could interpret it to say that cultivation and processing or cultivation of other agricultural products is not permitted. So maybe we want to make a comment that it should add a permitted use about to deal with the vertical farming as you suggest.
Yeah, just, I think the way of Ontario is going to go is probably a lot of farming is going to be under glass down the road, if that's the right terminology, because the way our weather is. So there's going to be more engineered plants for the growing, I guess, if you'd say it that way. But I think it needs to have a little bit extra other than just cannabis growing. That's all. Thanks.
Okay.
I do agree with that. I know just recently there was an ad out from the Weston Group, so Loblaws essentially, and they're putting out a contest, and I believe it amounts up to $30 million for companies who develop growing essentially food that we import generally from California. So really looking at berry cultivation, that sort of thing, and being able to grow that year round. So certainly I think it's coming, and it's more than cannabis. It's more than herbs and greens. There's so much more coming, and who knows what agriculture is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, by 2051. So yeah, I think that's a good idea, Mayor, to have more than just cannabis in there.
So do we want more blanketed language, or do you want to be prescribed and actually list vertical farming? Or do you just want a bit more, not actually prescribe vertical farming, but just a bit broader language in case it falls outside of that scope?
I think it's a categorical type permitted use is what we're asking for here.
Sure.
So agricultural products, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fair.
So we'll just make a note. You got to note that here.
What's staff's perspective? What's the consultant's perspective?
The only, I think it's appropriate to include something like a permit, to include it as a permitted use in this type of a designation. It'll be determined whether you probably aren't going to allow, whether you allow it through zoning as of right is another question. Like they might be subject to a zoning bylaw amendment to establish something like that. The only kind of risk I see is that you don't want all your employment areas occupied by greenhouses, for example. So there might be a difference in the zoning stage of defining the difference between what a greenhouse is and what these other uses are. And so the separation occurs there so that it doesn't erode your employment function. But at the end of the day, if there is a demand for vertical farming and greenhouses, whether those occur on ag land or in an employment designation, that's something that if there becomes a future increased demand, that's something to be considered. But I'd suggest the employment designation is probably the better place because you don't want to be necessarily occupying your good farmland with buildings, right? Even if you are growing crops on them. It's kind of like you drive by the Holland Marsh, the best farmland in the country, and you see a bunch of greenhouses sitting on it and you're like, what the heck is going on here, right?
But that's their seedlings they're putting down for the soil, right? So,
right.
Jamie, you had noted on here, that it does not permit accessory residential use.
Yeah, I was wrong there.
I think it does.
You're right, it does. I'm looking here.
Okay.
Under section 4151 and the second paragraph, it does permit that. So that's a mistake. That was to see if you were paying attention or not.
Well, she does.
Every once in a while. Okay, so the only council, then the only thing we're just going to add that cultivation of agricultural products permits indoor cannabis growing. That's fine. It follows in line with our other policies that we have in place through zoning and site plan control. So does council have anything else on employment designation?
Council, open.
Once, twice, gone.
That's good. Move on then.
Natural heritage, and staff agrees with what you've put in your section 4.3 natural core area. Jamie, if you want to just speak to it, staff, so council's aware and Jamie's aware, we fully agree with what you're saying.
So I'll just start off by saying this is a really complicated topic now, and it's been made complicated because of the language that's in the growth plan. I'll get on my soapbox for a second. Probably not something I need to be saying, but I feel that the growth plan is a document that's to deal with growth, but it deals with a bunch of it contains a bunch of environmental policies now. Your local municipality, the county, has done a great job over recent years of mapping environmental features and containing policies in the OP and regulations in your zoning bylaw to ensure that those important features are protected. Like, you have those things ingrained. But the province has now stepped in and put this added layer of policy on top of everything, which it's quite confusing. It's difficult. It's one of the areas that I can tell you planners in this area struggle with the most in trying to comprehend and understand. But in any event, what we're trying to say here, without getting into a whole bunch of detail, is that there needs to be an ability at the local level to refine natural heritage feature mapping through site-specific study. So what that means is, if somebody's proposing a development application, that conducting an EIS to delineate more and refine the limits of that environmental feature is important. And it's important for two reasons. Firstly, it often results in more environmental lands being identified and protected through zoning on a property that maybe the original mapping didn't capture everything correctly. So that's item one. Item two, in some instances, mapping may be overstated because it's done at a GIS basis. It's done based on like aerial photo interpretation in the best of times, but more so, it's typically done through like raster imagery, where it looks at colors on a map and just determines where the line should go. So we're saying that on the ground field truthing through an EIS is an important thing. And we just want to make sure that your policies reflect that, so that it really considers the local circumstance. So I don't know that I need to get into the specific details, but if council agrees with that principle, then we can provide comments on that basis. And I can tell you that's pretty consistent with what municipalities that we're working for in Simcoe County are providing. And it's the same, like the same setup basically, is that you've got county MCR, growth plan, similar situations. Is the townships are almost saying, like, we've got this in hand already, we protect the features well enough, like leave it to us to manage things, because otherwise municipal staff are dealing with these counter inquiries and telling people they can't. There's just a complete stop sign. It's not even a yield sign. It's just a complete stop sign because of what the province has provided, and they've done it at 50,000 feet. And it's pretty tough to explain somebody at the municipal counter that's looking for a building permit or looking to increase the size of their deck or do an addition to their house, that they can't do it because of the provincial mapping. We just want to make sure there's at least the ability for a local solution where appropriate.
Yeah,
100% agree.
a comment on that. I think I might have lost my track of thought now, but when it comes to, well, first of all, people don't want to leave their office to go actually have a look at something. So we found that out through some of the regulatory forces that govern where you can build. But the other thing that really bothers me is that the GIS that we have, we're told already it's just a tool. Don't necessarily go by that because it's not necessarily right. And yet they're going to do an official plan governed by the GIS that they look down from. So I mean, it's a damned if you do and damned if you don't. And it doesn't make any sense, because I know in reality, leaving their office and actually going out looking at something is probably impossible. But like somebody said in council, we're so diversified in the county, everything's different. They need to leave certain things to the township that we're familiar with. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so any other comments on that item?
No. Sure.
1 comment, if I may, through you, Mayor.
Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so would natural heritage designations, would they be the most likely spots where like an MZO like would be involved because there's challenges to building on those areas that might be sensitive?
My experience is no.
Okay,
You're probably thinking about the situation where they wanted to do the Amazon warehouse down in Ajax Pickering there. I'm guessing that's what precipitated this.
Mhm.
No, that was a pretty unique situation. And at the end of the day, I think Amazon walked away from it, if I'm not mistaken.
they did.
But no, MZOs are, I'll say they're an extraordinary tool because they're something that for 30 years never got used. They were really designed for situations like if you had an auto manufacturer coming in, like let's say Honda and Alliston, they were used to build Honda and Alliston, for example. Like you've got a huge need for the plant and all the parts plants that support it. And no municipality would ever have had enough land designated to support that. So you needed a tool to make it happen quickly in the right location. So it was for that, and it was for Northern Ontario where you don't have planning tools in place, like where there is no zoning bylaws. So if you want to do anything at all, you would do a minister's zoning order to provide some controls. But it's not something that you use to blow environmental policies out of the water at all. And it's something the province won't use for that. Like I have submitted 2 MZO applications, and in both of them, you need to demonstrate what the net environmental benefit's going to be of what you're doing. In my view, for the township, for the county to, or for the province to really look favorable on it. Like, because at the end of the day, you're usually subject to conservation authority regulations and other restrictions. And I don't think, this is just my observation, is I don't think the province really wants to do something to get around environmental rules for the most part. Like they, but that was a unique situation, and that's kind of done with now. But
Okay, thank you.
I don't see that happening here for anything really.
Just a comment though, when you mentioned about the province wanting, I didn't catch the word that you'd said there, but is that they would look at it for the fact that you're going to have so much for employment? Like it's like, shoot, I wish I'd wrote the word down that you said right there, but it's something
There
that
has
the
to be
province, go ahead.
Sorry, there has to be a public interest at play. So employment uses would be one. Like let's say you didn't have enough land designated and you've got a major employer coming. The perfect example I'll give you is Oromadani Township. I actually submitted this application. So Napoleon, that makes your fireplaces and barbecues and everything, they submitted an MZO application because they wanted to build a new 300,000 square foot production facility in the township. And they've already got a 270,000 square foot facility and a 300,000 square foot facility, and they needed another. But there's no lands in that township that are designated anywhere that could support a building of that size. So rather than go through an OPA process that's going to take a significant amount of time, the township agreed to support an MZO, and they did an MZO to zone the lands to permit that facility. So they're used for things like employment uses. Like I gave the example of Alliston Honda. They've been used for they have been used for residential, but I'd say in pretty limited circumstances. And usually it's where it's imminent that lands are, say, outside of a settlement area, but will be included as part of the next OP review in the settlement area for growth. And it's kind of an imminent thing where they might consider those. I've seen them used for things like seniors housing developments or things that are in the public interest that are needed right away. So
Great, thanks. I think, Council, we probably could move on from this one then.
okay. But yeah, my experience too is that just one last comment on those is the municipality has to provide favorable comments for the province to consider. Like they really want to see municipalities on side. Okay, so the next one relates to additional residential units, and I don't know, Candace, if this was an item that they'd already updated in the official plan or if this is new. But again, we've spoken about this a little bit previously, but the plan
Yeah,
does,
we wanted it out, I think.
pardon me, sorry.
We want the, under 5.6.24, it says properties within Asphodel-Norwood may be exempted from some section 4 where deemed appropriate by the municipality. Ed and I are a bit stumped with that. We like that sentence, maybe back in the on-farm diversified use section or some of the other sections where we want a unique policy to us. But we don't have a whole lot of waterfront, to be honest with you. We're not really sure why that's there. So we would just like to see it removed from a staff perspective. Which is additional residential units will not be permitted in waterfront areas on private roads which are not maintained by the municipality and where emergency access may be limited. But it says we would be exempt from that section. We don't really have private roads that are not maintained. And one very small example, and considering where it is, definitely emergency access is limited and we would want them to go through a process. We don't want that sentence in there.
Okay, so we'll make a note on that sentence if council's agreeable to this. So yeah, just this section's clarifying. I didn't have any specific comments or concerns. I just wanted to raise this as an item for council's knowledge or education piece, but it does allow for secondary or second dwelling units or additional dwelling units on properties. Certainly your zoning bylaw can help implement this and provide where they're permitted as of right or not as of right, or what specific requirements need to be met in order to establish them, whether it's a minimum lot size or minimum or any specific property standards. Can they be located in accessory buildings? How far are those accessory buildings from the lot line? Those sorts of things. Do you need a certain size property to be eligible for one? Do we allow them in accessory buildings in all zones or just in certain zones? Like those are the kinds of things that could be prescribed in your bylaw.
And Jamie, if I can just ask, Ed, I think you spoke to this earlier, that we are a little bit less restrictive than some other townships. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So that comment, not permitted in waterfront areas, that still stands then, I take it, right?
It does. My recommendation is you keep it in there, that they not be permitted in waterfront areas. Just
Well,
there's
I
that.
was just thinking of an example of that is bed and breakfasts and parties. And one thing after another, we've had complaints already on some waterfront areas where the people have over exaggerated what the amount should be there. And then the septics can't handle it and it flows to the river and just a lot of mess. So I'm in agreement with that.
Well, Mayor, it specifically says not permitted on waterfront on private roads that are not maintained by the municipality, not like a carte blanche, not on waterfront at all. The waterfront section obviously can't be in floodplain areas, has to deal with servicing, sanitary. There's a whole bunch of then further requirements that it would have to meet in order for it to be considered. But the carte blanche not permitted is just on private roads that are not maintained by the municipality.
Perfect. Any other comments on that one, council?
No.
Okay.
The next one was related to tiny homes. Again, this is just for information. They've included some policies in the official plan that prescribe or that provide some details related to tiny homes. I don't personally have any comments on these. I don't know if council or staff does, but they do provide some limitations, like it's not a trailer situation. It's a built structure that's either modular that gets put on a site or it's built on the site, but it's not a trailer type situation.
Yeah, staff has no comments.
No, it's good.
We will address it in our next zoning bylaw update. Right now, we have minimum square footages for sizes of dwellings. If you're building a home, where the Ontario Building Code tells you what the minimum size of a kitchen is, what the minimum size of a living room or a bedroom or a bathroom, or the building code specifies the minimum sizes of all the various rooms. And some people or some municipalities have changed their zoning bylaw to remove the minimum square footage of being 1,200 square feet for a house or being 1,000 square feet for a house. Our old zoning bylaw requested, it required 1,200 square feet was the minimum size. And then I had a zoning bylaw amendment passed where it was reduced down to like 1,000 square feet is the minimum size. Where the future is that there will be some tiny homes, and I guess it's a tiny home is an okay thing to me if it's a second unit. So I don't know if we would want to have a bunch of say 20-foot wide lots with individual little tiny homes put on them. Compared to like a
Hey,
row
Ed.
house is different.
And I'm just going to stop you there for a minute. I'm going to ask council, we take a 5-minute break to look after some business in town. So if everybody could just mute and turn their video off for 5 minutes, we'll reconvene here. So do I need a motion for that, Candace, to take a break for 5?
Suspend council for 5 minutes. Yes, you do.
Yep. So I need a motion. So if somebody wants to speak out,
I will.
Barry?
Mayor, I will.
Second it by,
I can, Lori.
thank you. All in favor, just say yes.
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 Wilburn, Paula?
Yep, yes.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break or we'll get back to you when Candace lights back up again. Thank you. So just mute and turn your camera off. Thanks.
No shit, no. But you can come in anytime you want. Like I just check my
Okay, council, if we can come back on board again here. And yes, please, staff. Did we lose Lori off the line?
She's having internet issues.
Yeah. Okay, well, we have a quorum at this time, so we'll just wait for, we won't wait for Lori to come back in, I guess, but we'll carry on. So I need a motion then to resume council at 11:15. Sorry for the interruption. Motion by Councillor Archer, seconded by Councillor War. All in favor? That's carried. So we're back into our council meeting. And Ed, you were talking about tiny homes there. I'm sorry.
Yes, like it's funny that they're putting a tiny home section in the official plan. Like our zoning bylaw would more or less dictate the sizes and all the rest of it for, you know, dwellings and detached dwellings or semis and permitted uses. And so it's nice of the county to allow us to have tiny homes. But that would be something as that we will implement in our zoning bylaw under the square footage, that type of thing, right? So it would-
Yeah, just to comment on that. So like there, once again, though, is that this is a township thing that can be looked after through our own building permits and one thing after another, because we're not going to let somebody put a tiny home in the middle of a swamp or something like that, like county. But on a tiny home, Ed, though, it'd be like a garden home. Like they'd have to have some form of a septic going to it. They'd have to have some form of water going to it. They'd have to have some form of a foundation on it, would they not?
Yes, it's not going to be like right now you could have, like some people call them a trailer or something like that. Like if you wanted to have a mobile or some type of a house, the building code allows, if it's built to a certain standard, a CSA Z280 or a different CSA standard 277, that they're built to a house standard and their CSA approved wiring and plumbing and the insulation levels and everything is appropriate for our climate and it meets all the building code provisions, and you build a proper foundation for it, you can have that. It's just that you're not allowed to bring in a trailer on wheels or take it off the wheels and just set it on the ground. There's only like the 2 certifications that would permit a trailer type of a home. These tiny homes here, I'm assuming would be, they would either be built off-site to a house standard or built on-site to a house standard. And so they would still need to be anchored and you know, go through, have trusses that are approved for our snow load. You know, you wouldn't be able to build these down like in the States somewhere in a warm climate and bring them up here and expect them to be, you know, meet our snow loads possibly. So there's lots of things we would look at before we would allow, you know, a tiny home
Yeah.
to be
I
built.
think, Mayor, there's down in Coburg in the southern end, they actually have little tiny home villages. They seem,
Subdivisions.
you know, they're actually little subdivisions or little communities with tiny homes where they have common, maybe hall that if someone wants to have a family gathering, they use that if they need a larger space. It's to accommodate maybe senior living, sustainable living, affordability, but everything has to be built according to, you know, Ontario Building Code, you know, maybe on its own land, whatever provisions may be, but it's definitely something that is the way of the future for sure. The tiny home communities are becoming more and more popular. And it's something that I think the county's just trying to put some blanket language in there to address it. And then each individual township will have the opportunity to get a bit more prescriptive with it if we so choose. But these tiny home communities, there is a wave of it going across the country to deal with the housing crisis, et cetera. So I do see it coming.
Yeah, I agree with the tiny homes for sure. It's just when you watch the programs on TV, I mean, they're building them with like they're not up to our standards of how Ontario building code is. So I just don't want people to get confused out there to the fact that they can just show up with something on a trailer with wheels, because lots of people are doing it.
No,
All down through New York State and whatever on the TV that
Yeah.
we're watching. So I mean, I don't
No,
want
no.
confusion there, that we still have to follow some building code rules up here and carry on from there. So I agree with it. Thank you. You're muted, Ed.
I'd just like to point out too, that the Ontario Building Code is now being amended that allows these tiny homes to be built in other townships, and other township building officials do the building inspections on them. And they have approval attached to them with the inspection approvals that they did framing and insulation, vapor barrier and plumbing and all the rest of it. And then they can bring them into our township and apply. They would have to get a building permit to do it. Say somebody wanted to build them here in Asphodel-Norwood. I could give them a building permit to build this tiny home. I could do the inspections on that tiny home, and then they could take our records and that tiny home and take it over into Duro-Dummer, and they could install that with a building permit over in Duro-Dummer because it's passed building official inspections in our township that complied with the intent of the Ontario Building Code. So that's brand new 2022 in the Ontario Building Code. So there could be little tiny home businesses being created. And it sort of makes sense that if it passes through our inspections, that you'd be able to take that building and put it somewhere else. But the catch is that they require 2 building permits. So one from us that would do all the inspections on the building, and then one from wherever the building lands up to they would get, the development fees charged against them or whatever else, and have to comply with all their rules as well. But that's brand new, and that's just for tiny homes.
Wow.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, but I think it's a reflection of the times, right? That, housing affordability for people. This is just another potential opportunity, and it's nice to see that we have some language in the OP to kind of deal with it.
All right, I think we can move on from tiny homes. I don't think there's any more questions. I'm not sure if you're muted and you're talking. I can't see you, so
Sorry, I was muted. My apologies.
no problem.
Home occupations policies are fairly permissive. I've just been looking at them in a little bit more detail here. I did say that it wasn't clear that they didn't permit home occupations in accessory buildings. I'm not sure. It doesn't specifically say that here, so I think that's a question for council. The reason I just bring it up is I have had a number of, historically, home occupations had to occur within the main dwelling unit. I've had some municipalities recently say, you know what, we're okay with a home occupation occurring in a detached garage or something like that. Like if you have to put an office in a detached garage, because an example of a home occupation is something like, it could be you have a law office in your house or a dentist office in your house. Well, that's not maybe a great example, but you're an accountant running a business out of your house, or even some type of limited amount of online sales could be happening in your house. So I don't have any issues if we're going to allow accessory apartments for residential uses to also allow an home occupation to run out of a house or out of their accessory building, provided you've got those qualifications in the bylaw and the zoning bylaw that limit the scale of it. So I just wanted to make sure you weren't running into an OPA if you needed to do a home occupation in an accessory building. So I don't think it's a big issue that council needs to spend much time on here.
No, I'm in agreement.
Yeah, it's good.
With the pandemic, we do know that people are working more from home, that there's a lot more online sales. There's an ability to make a living working out of your house where you might not have had that ability before with those sorts of things. So I just want to make sure our planning documents recognize that and allow for those sorts of uses where it's compatible and where the scale of it's appropriate. Like, it's not appropriate to have a delivery truck coming by every hour, for example, in a residential area necessarily, but there's certainly lots of opportunities for home occupations.
Agreed. That's where we need the unique provision for Asphodel-Norwood to allow that, because the county official plan is not going to.
Yeah, we'll have a look at it in more detail. I just don't think it's abundantly clear if they allow for it in accessory buildings, but we want to make sure that, I want to ask them that question. If they interpret their plan that it doesn't, then let's add that unique provision. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Council, you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And
Glad
then
to have you back, Lori.
Sure. So then home industries, I don't see any concerns with this section. I just wanted to raise it that it is something that's included there and that the policies are quite permissive as it relates to home industry. Difference between a home industry and a home occupation, again, is that home industry might be something like you have a small machine shop or something like that associated with your property. And usually it does occur in an accessory building almost exclusively as opposed to within a house. Home industries are things you often see more often on rural properties as opposed to in settlement areas. The zoning really contains some provisions related to that. And I'm sure when you update your bylaw, you're going to want to take a look at home occupation, home industry definitions and the provisions in your bylaw to make sure they're 21st century. Not to say I haven't looked at your bylaw, so I don't know what it contains currently. That's just an observation of other municipalities and some refinements they've made to those sections. Okay. Where are we going now? Short-term accommodation?
Yep.
So the county's really providing no direction for you at all on a policy basis on how you should manage short-term accommodation. It's simply saying, I would characterize this policy as an enabling policy. It's basically enabling lower tier municipalities to establish things like licensing bylaws if they so choose, or zoning bylaws, or other, we'll call them good neighbor bylaws like noise bylaws, to help deal with and properly manage short-term accommodations. So I don't have any concern with what the county's done here. It's just they're not providing you with any direction, but they're leaving it up to you to choose your own destiny on short-term accommodations.
And that's
I'm gonna-
probably best. It's a pretty hot topic across the county, especially in the northern municipalities. In the cottage country, they see it a lot more than what we see it here, but it is something that the township's going to have to address from a policy perspective in 2022. But it isn't you get the odd. We've had the one property that was a bit of an issue, but it has been sold and dealt with. But overall, it's not a huge issue here like it is in some other municipalities. So
yeah, this isn't directly related to this OP, but I'm going to tell you what you're going to be up against in the future. And what I think the planning issues are is that we know a bit about this topic, Ellen and I, because we're involved in an appeal in Ormodonti against their bylaw on behalf of an association. They took a pretty unique approach in Ormodonti. There's an appeal going on in Ottawa as well. And then we're working for Tiny Township, which is the shores of Georgian Bay, just north of Wasaga Beach.
Yep.
They have a task force that we're working with to develop how best they should regulate short-term accommodations. And I think where it's going to land there is zoning and licensing. And we're also working with Severn Township, which is basically the Severn River and Lake Couchiching and a number of lakes at the lower end of the Trent Severn that are part of that municipality. Same sort of thing. But I think what you are likely going to be saddled with as a municipality is that you've got those historic cottages or properties that may have rented as vacation properties for a week or 2 weeks throughout the summer. And those ones are probably ones that you're not concerned about. It's going to be those few party houses or ghost hotel type situations where the owners never are there and they rent out exclusively. That are those are the ones that you're going to want to establish some sort of parameters around or bylaws around. And that's probably where many municipalities will end up, as opposed to an outright prohibition. I think that's really the fight in Ormonde and in Ottawa, is those there's some areas where they've outright prohibited them, full stop, for any length of time, and that's where the concerns lie, is that they've basically outlawed someone from renting their cottage to a friend for a week, for example, or 2 weeks in the summertime.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think with the amount of taxes and one thing after another, especially on water properties, not that it's a pecuniary interest for me, only in a different township, but the fact is that, like, the costs are going up and people need another way to diversify in order to pay their bills, basically. But I think we can protect ourselves through bylaws with noise and one thing after another, if somehow that it is designated as a B&B or a rental property, that any bills or anything that's concerning from there will have to go back as a bill going to the homeowner or the person that owns that property. So simple as that.
Yeah, it'll be an issue you'll have to address certainly at some point in time.
And I just have a comment through you,
Yeah,
Mayor.
just in a council meeting. What's up?
Oh, sorry. I'll talk. This came up at County Council, and we did just defer it back to the individual townships, because the difference between Cavan Monaghan and North Kawartha is immense with the amount of short-term accommodations. So it just made so much more sense to take it on individually. So just a comment to let the rest of council know that it did come to county.
Okay, on to the next then, I guess.
So getting into the natural heritage features and hazards, same comment basically as what we talked about with those previous policies that implemented the growth plan, is just ensure that there's an ability to allow for expansions to existing buildings and structures on existing lots that aren't in those key features, that there needs to be some recognition for what's there, and there needs to be basically, I don't think you want someone that's got a lot that's a landscape lot, for example, to have to undertake an EIS if they want to add a deck on their property or if they want to add a small addition. So we're just saying there needs to be some flexibility built into those policies.
Agreed.
Yep, I agree too. Council, you agree?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Next.
Okay. All right, next one. So this is dealing with wetlands, and I just need to get to that section here. So we just wanted some clarity and possibly some flexibility in this section, particularly where the wetlands part of a recreational water body, so part of a lake, for example. We just felt that the restrictions that are included here and requiring like any sort of restriction and setbacks, the 30-meter setback particularly, we thought could be problematic in some existing situations where you have existing built up shoreline areas. Again, someone wanting to do a small addition to their property or a minor variance, for example, that 30-meter absolute restriction in the bylaw, we think could be problematic. That's particularly, I think it's in paragraph 4 under section 6.31. We think there needs to be some flexibility built into those sections to not require an official plan amendment when you're in those sorts of situations. That I think we have the planning tools in place through the variance process, and if necessary, they could do a study, but it shouldn't be the kind of thing where an official plan amendment's required. Again, what they're trying to do here, I think, is implement the growth plan. But we think there's some flexibility that can be provided to municipalities under this. Again, this is another item we would need to work up those comments and work up what we think appropriate language would be. But I think we're looking for direction from council in that regard.
Yeah, I run into this different planning parts because I'm part of that around the county. And I think one of the strong points is that with this particular county council, that when there is something that comes forward that say county staff don't necessarily like as far as planning is concerned, but the council is basically all in favor of it. It still has to go to a planning matter, but they still bring it back to council after the fact for us to vote on it. And with the council of today, we basically look at what that's township's council has actually said and taken their word for it, because this is what's the right thing to do. Is so the saying goes at county now, it's just the right thing to do. So I think there could be some better language in that for our township, especially to give us some more flexibility as it's suggested, for sure. Any comments from council?
I just have a comment through you, Mayor. Yeah, and when you look at some of the waterfront properties, and certainly it's not like we have a lot, but getting that 30 meters is pretty tough, because a lot of these lots were formed many decades ago, and the lots aren't that big. And even just to put on a deck or, you know, a small addition, sometimes it's pretty tight if you have, you know, hydro lines, you've got the waterfront, you've got your line, your property line. And I think there needs to be some common sense approach to this. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
And just to make it clear, this isn't something the county's like forced on putting in their plan on their own. They're really trying to capture what the growth plan requires. And it goes back to my soapbox speech earlier about the growth plan getting into local planning matters. I think a little bit too much on some of these things, but anyways, if everybody's in favor of that, we can suggest some additional wording or some revised wording to the county.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next one is page 1. Just bear with me. I just want to get to the right page here. So this term key hydrologic feature and areas, this may be a new term to some people, but this again comes from the growth plan. What it's really talking about is lakes and rivers. So it's a fancy way of saying lakes and rivers and water resources. I don't know that I need to get into a lot of detail about this, but it's really the same concept that we just discussed under the last heading, which was wetlands. And it's to provide some flexibility for those areas that are designated that where there's existing shoreline lots or where they're designated currently. That there should be a consideration to treat these shoreline areas or a little bit different than other rural areas, for example, because you're basically putting all of the existing development in a non-conforming situation, which I don't think is good planning. But and we do have, I think our justification for that is we do have provisions in the zoning bylaw, and we do for specific setbacks, and we do have requirements in the OP for studies when you're in proximity to these features. So there should be some common sense, I think, applied to these policies and some flexibility included.
But just as an example, so somebody's building a house or has a house already, it's a small cottage, but it's dilapidated and it's within the 30-meter range, and they want to tear it down. So they tear it down, basically build back on the same footprint, but then want to add a small bedroom addition to it or something like that. I mean, we have to have flexibility in order to help these people out. And in the long run, we still make more taxes off of it as impact assesses them for a bigger home too. So
yeah,
it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, it's really, it says any development, for example, any development within 120 meters of key hydrologic feature will require a natural heritage evaluation. So if you've got a cottage that's 20 meters from the lake currently, and you want to put an addition on the back of it, you have to do a natural heritage evaluation. Like, what's the possible conceivable impact of an addition on the back of a cottage that's already set back 20 meters from the lake? Like, I don't think there is one. So there just needs to be an ability to at least scope the need for these studies or remove them through pre-consultation in certain instances. So there needs to be a bit of flexibility built into these.
Yeah, makes sense.
Just another question on that. Like, if they're going to build something as an addition and whatever, but it's not actually on the actual footprint, then that activates on water an archaeological study through the Indians, basically. Is that like through the nations? Doesn't that get activated automatically, Ed?
Depending on the site, we have different archaeology sites, and depending on the extent of the excavation work that would be done. So there are certain sites that required if they're doing any excavation work, but then there are sites that if they're not doing excavation work. So we've even had like an addition put on, they have these screw-in type of piles now, where there is no excavation work for the, like, instead of an addition being on piers, if they do the screw-in foundation, these engineered pile systems, they're like a big steel auger that you screw into the ground. It's like a big screw. And then you can build on top of that. Then we haven't required them to go through that. Generally, it's a Planning Act application that requires the archaeology study. So if you're creating lots or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from council on this? We're just looking for more flexibility as it's stated.
Yeah, and staff will work with Jamie on the wording that we provide back to the county.
Yep.
And
Okay.
I think it's really important because Orca will be the one that will be generally giving an approval prior to the building permit being issued. And if there's no flexibility in here, then Orca is going to require the study and then do the peer review of the study each and every time prior to an addition being put on an existing building. And so 99% of the time, you're going to require an Orca approval for any waterfront type of property for permits. It'll be, the odd case where you would not require an Orca approval, but we just have to have that flexibility in there so that it's not a mandatory thing. And this could, depending on the study, it may be worst case would be a 4-season type of study compared to a 1-season, type of a study. So it could be a very big delay, possibly.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think the last bullet point or the last item, I think we can go on to the next one, Ellen. I think we just. So the last one deals with transportation. The comments that we just made here were that we think there should be some additional policies considered, or we'd like to talk to council about this, is what we've seen in some other municipalities' official plans is things like when the province is updating a highway or doing any work that's through a settlement area, for example, that they need to incorporate things like bike lanes or sidewalks or improvements to that municipality, to that roadscape, or things that traffic calming measures, for example, different things that promote more of the community feel and the fact that that piece of infrastructure is going through the community. And I think that may be appropriate for comment to provide for both county roads and highways in this instance. And maybe it's not just in the settlement areas. Maybe there's things like when the county's updating a road or doing improvements to a road in the township, they should consider bike lanes or something like that, or additional paved shoulders in certain locations. Helps promote things like cycling activities that generate tourism and different aspects. I just know that other municipalities have done that. And often it's roads that link communities within a township. I know in Seguin Township, which is up by Lake Rosso and Lake Joe, they've included some policies in their official plan from their transportation master plan that state when the province is updating this section of road that connects Humphrey to Rosso, that they need to include enhanced shoulders to provide for connections in between the two communities. And that's something we've got in our official plan. So when the province goes to do that, put the official plan in front of them and say, hey, we've done this. This is a document approved by the province, and we like to see these infrastructure things undertaken. So it's not saying they absolutely will do it, but I think it's a good thing to consider for a municipality.
I think you'll find that through county. So just for instance, we have County Road 42 or Trent River Road.
Yeah.
They're going to make that a bypass road, they call that, eventually. So bypass, as far as the county's concerned, means if there's large traffic, trucks, like windmills and whatever, that road is designed in order to, and designed and built to take larger vehicles. So that could be a main artery for our township if we have more building going on into the east and on the south side of town. So that's a good opportunity for us to actually have a sidewalk possibly going out there, or street lights or something like that. But I can see county fighting back on something like that because building, when we have building, they want the buildings to pay for growth, or growth to pay for the building of some sort, or however they formulate that. So it's going to be a bit of an argument. We can try to slide this one in somehow, but I can see us having to probably play ball with them and kind of make money for the future in order to save for projects like that if we have a plan and partner up with them possibly. But any comments?
I just have one through you, Mayor. When you talk about provincial highways, have any municipalities had that in place? Has it gone to the province saying that, you know, it is part of their official plan, and you know, we would like to see these active transportation initiatives as you rebuild this road? And has there been pushback, or are we not there yet as a province?
I'm aware in Seguin Township in Rosso that they are at that stage of commenting on it and providing some design requirements for some traffic calming measures and different things on Highway 141 that goes through there. I'm not just, I don't have any specific examples other than that of where it's been implemented, but that was a recommendation from the transportation consultant that was hired to do their plan. So I'm sure it's happened in other areas in the province, or else these transportation experts wouldn't be recommended.
Yeah.
I think what it's really designed to do is to say, hey, we've got a plan, we're building a community here. In order to build a community, there's some certain things that we need to do with the road infrastructure. It doesn't impact the functionality of the road, but it does impact it does assist with our community building exercises. I think that's really the big picture there.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I completely agree with having those components in place.
Yeah. And again, I don't think it's they're going to do everything, as the mayor mentioned. I think it's a give and take, and I think it's got to be a mutual relationship, and you have to have a plan, and you have to demonstrate you're coming to the table too.
Yeah, but at least the door's open.
Yeah.
You say that's what we want, but here's what we're willing to do down the road through staff.
It's an enabling policy is what it is.
That's exactly, thank you for the
Yeah.
big word there.
Yeah. At least you can have a discussion.
All right. So I think we've got some work to do.
Can you go back to the last one, the one before this one? I thought there was something that caught my eye on the screen there. Water resources. No, that one there, the 30-meter setback. So I know you said you didn't have much to say about that, but there is some lots in town that don't have a 30-meter setback that are a lot possibly that are on the river or on a pond or something. I just,
Yeah, this is where I was saying the language, instead of requiring 30 meters, I think it should encourage it. Like it should be less stringent language
Yeah.
and more flexibility built into it.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to hear. Thanks.
I, just as a big picture, I hate numbers in an official plan, because as soon as you need to vary from the number, you're into an official plan amendment. Like I prefer official plans that would say something like setbacks should be implemented in the zoning bylaw to ensure the quality of the water course is maintained, for example, and then leave it up to the zoning bylaw to prescribe how to do that and the setback. And then you're just amending the zoning bylaw. And then the test becomes, if you're reducing a zoning bylaw setback, you have to meet that OP requirement of, is this reduced setback still protecting the water quality that the OP requires to be protected? Like that to me is the better way to do it than include these prescriptive numbers. But
Yeah.
again, what the county's doing here is trying to implement this vegetation protection zone that the growth plan tells them they have to include. So it's really the province that I personally think is bad form in their policy documents numbers. But
Well, Lori, that was the one that came to county there where the people ended up having a permit to rebuild, but then they built 5 feet closer or so, 7 feet closer on the one corner to the shoreline. And because the way that was written on their official plan, they had to have that certain setback. County staff said that, well, they're going to have to tear it down and rebuild it basically, because we can't approve this. And we had to override them at council in order to make sure that the people could carry on. I mean, they asked forgiveness and she was very good about it and all that stuff, but that was a real pain to go through just because it says 30 meters.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. Another common sense situation that shouldn't have had to go through all that work. Exactly.
yeah, I just, it's on my soapbox again. I don't know that the people writing this stuff have ever worked at a counter and dealt with residents coming in seeking building permits. And at the end of the day, that's what planning documents are about. They're about built like, what do you need to do to get a building permit and protect what's important? So, so yeah, we're struggled with implementing that at our level here.
I'm just going to say, I think your soapbox has shocks and wheels on it. Just being light on the subject.
Is there anything, so that completes the table that we had prepared. I want to leave it open though. Is there anything that any members of council have been through, or Candace that you and Ed have been through that you also would like to talk about, or also think we need to provide comment on? So,
Are you done with the slideshow? There you go. Perfect. Thanks. All right. Anybody, staff, council? Paula, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks through you, Mayor. I just had one question for clarification. I was just wondering, under the increase for the population forecast, where do retirement homes and like seniors' homes and those fall into the increase or the population? Is that an institution, or is that part of the population forecast for the community?
Do you want me to answer that, Ellen, or do you want to deal with that?
You can grab that one if you want, Jamie. But
Sure. So it would fall under the population side of the ledger. Like there's really two sides. There's population and there's employment. So
right.
It falls under the population side.
Okay, thank you.
But I think the next question is, what type of land use is it? Is it institutional or is it a residential land use? Yeah. I think that's really where you were going with that. And the answer to that is the line is blurred, and it depends on the type of use that we're dealing with, on whether it would be considered institutional or residential. Most residential designations, though, from an OP perspective, do permit like institutional uses of that kind. So it depends.
Okay, thank you.
Just go ahead, Lori. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if staff have any more to say, but I just want to make a comment that this has been an excellent exercise. Roger and I have seen a fair bit of the official plan through county, whether it be at county council or different committees that we're on. And this has been very good, having all the documents in place, the mapping, the actual official plan, and then everything we went through, and then that table at the end. So I don't know if other townships have gone through this. I think Cavan Monaghan has. I don't know if other townships in the county have, but man, it's certainly much appreciated. So thanks to staff and our consultants for putting this together for us. And I guess to end on a question, obviously you've got some wording and some work to do within that table. Then this will go back to the TAC committee, I assume. And then will you get feedback immediately on that, or will that, like, will you see any feedback immediately, or will that just, the next draft of the official plan comes out and you'll see whether your comments were taken? I guess I just want to know what the process is moving forward.
I don't know, if Candace, if you want to talk about the details, but I would expect that we'd prepare these comments and probably have a meeting with staff. Probably have a meeting with Keziah and Ian and work through our comments, and they're pretty good at listening and see if we can come to some sort of at a staff level, at least some sort of an understanding about what our comments have been provided. So then they can in turn make that recommendation to county council, as the case may be. But yeah, I would expect there'd be some meeting, but maybe Candace can talk about the formal meeting processes that are expected, where our comments end up at the end of the day.
Sure. So Ian has asked that our comments be sent through staff to the TAC. They are definitely willing to meet with each individual township that has comments. Obviously, they're going to wait for the commenting period to close. And then I think we should ask for a formal response back to council. Obviously, we'll meet, we'll have some discussion, but something has to be communicated, I would say, formally in writing back to council to respond as to whether staff's going to include it in their the next draft that goes to county council, whether they're not going to include it with the following justifications as to why, based on Hempson's Consulting's recommendations or whatever it may be. And then ultimately county council has the final decision, but that's how I foresee it going. Provide the comments to Ian and Keziah, have a staff meeting with them. It'll go to the TAC and ask for a written response back from staff as to whether it's going to be presented to county council or not.
Okay, thanks.
In all reality, though, there's only 3 municipalities in all of Peterborough County that have room to expand. And like there's us, Asphodel-Norwood, Cavan, Monaghan, and Selwyn that can actually handle growth. So I mean, they're going to have to play ball with us to a certain extent. You'd say that like how else are we going to meet what the province wants as far as numbers are concerned if we're not all in the play box together, right?
Well, I suspect the official plan comments that we're going to make, I don't see that's where the conversation is going to be necessarily had. I think it's going to go back to the comment on the 15% for the building permit activity. I think that's going to be probably our biggest conversation that we'll have with them. Some of this other stuff that we've talked about today, I don't foresee staff pushing back to. If we want to, an exemption clause in certain policies within the OP for us, like we've always had traditionally, other municipalities are going to have the same thing. I don't foresee, as long as we're not completely violating some sort of provincial legislation or against any sort of county policy, I don't see them pushing back on us too hard on those things. But the 15% is going to be a bigger conversation. And then obviously the intensification, they've already put the request forward to the province. I mean, I don't really know what else they can do until they hear back from them, other than hopefully they continue to advocate for it and don't just let it go into Never Never Land, which I don't suspect will be the case. But I have.
Sorry, they just want to give us 12% right now. Is that what I understand?
Yes.
Yeah, and we're looking for 15%. But
yes.
If the province comes back and says you have to meet 45%, where they want to only drop down to so much percentage, like whatever it is now, I forget. Then if the province comes back and says, no, we want you to meet this certain justification, then they're going to probably want to come back to us and say, can you guys hit 20%? You know, like, how else does it get split up amongst the people that can expand, right?
And from my understanding, I know this has been mentioned at county that Keziah and staff are certainly pushing the province. They need answers. They're working it. They didn't just submit it and let it die. So I think they're pushing.
Well, and I know they're really worried about the July deadline. I'm not. I know it's there and the province has, you know, put it there, but ultimately it's too important of a document. If it's first week of August, they're going to be receiving a flood of these across the province for approvals. And, you know, if it takes us another 3-4 weeks to get it right, and this document lives and governs such an important part of our business, then so be it. I'm not as worried about that July deadline as the county is, but I also don't work for the county, so I guess I don't have to be, but I would just prefer to see it done right than be stuck to that deadline, because I guarantee you there's going to be lots of municipalities that don't hit it. So,
Well, yeah, that's the word out. It's like there's tons of 440 municipalities in the province, and probably only half of them are probably going to make the deadline. But the fact is like, when does the province go into lame duck too? They're going to an election.
we'll drop the writ probably end of April, beginning of May, like right in that area.
They lose their powers to govern anyways. It goes to staff, right? So I don't know. I didn't know what the rush was.
I drafted a motion. It's quite a motion. I think it encompasses everything we've talked about, Mayor. So whenever council
I
and
think
everyone's ready.
Well, I just want to thank our consultants here for coming on board and being patient with us. And thank you for putting it in layman's terms, because like my deputy mayor said, it just made it so much easier compared to some high level discussions that we have at the county that you might as well be talking a different language sometimes. So
Yeah.
I think it's good. Just right now, before I ask for, go ahead, Ed, go ahead.
I just had a quick comment that I've been part of the TAC meetings. You know, we've had several dozen meetings to get this far, and for a 250-page document or greater than 250-page document, it's a really good document. And so when we go over it with a fine-tooth comb and we come up with a half a dozen or a dozen items, that just goes to show you that this is really good. And we went you know, far and wide to get where it is today, and that the county staff and the other townships, and the First Nations and everybody, they've all, and the health unit and ORCA and all the rest of the agencies out there, they've all contributed a lot of comments to get to where it is right now. And everybody's worked together really well to get this far. So I really do commend the county staff for listening to us thus far.
I appreciate that comment, Ed, because some of the rhetoric out there in the public opinion or whatever is that things may not have been as smooth as the way that you just mentioned it. So I'm glad to hear that from staff's perspective. But
well, we can speak on Asphodel-Norwood's perspective. The other townships can speak about their experience. But from our experience to date, county staff and Hemson Consulting had a willing spirit to listen to us, and it's not over yet. So there's lots of conversation and communication to be had. So.
Great, thanks. All right, well, any other comments from council at this time before we call for motion? Councillor Walsh, please.
Yeah, just quickly, and I think Candace, you may have already answered my question, but so the deadline in the sand is by July 1st, is that the county will have adopted a new official plan, is that correct?
I think they have to have it submitted to the province.
Or submitted to the province by July the 1st?
Yeah, it's the MCR that's got to be done by then.
The municipal comprehensive review.
Okay.
Not the official plan.
Okay. And so just following through, so we have to have the MCR done by July 1st. When will county actually adopt, from a timing perspective, a new OP?
I can ask that question if you like.
Like,
Spring?
will it happen in 20?
That's a question to the
2022?
mayor and deputy mayor, I'd say.
2022, or is that not realistic?
I would find it hard to believe.
Okay.
Let's
we
hope
would-
so.
I
The
think
only,
there's
the thing I could just maybe add is that OPs aren't appealable anymore, so it could be, I'm sure they're gonna want as much consensus as possible on this, and I'm sure their focus is on this MCR. That said, to Ed's point, like it is a good document. I was impressed when I reviewed it, to be honest. But yeah, I don't think they're gonna rush slamming it through this term of council. Like, I could be wrong, but yeah, but I guess that's a question we can endeavor to take back to Ian and see if he's got a potential schedule and work plan for the finalization of it.
My only concern, and a few others of council from county, was the fact that it was off to the province before all the consulting was done. But listening to staff, a lot of consulting was done behind the scenes, not necessarily with council, because let's face it, a little too high up for us in some places. I mean, we have a hard time with a Zoobla, never mind a planning app and whatever. So on and on. So
And a
thank you for all
Zoobla is
your
a
input.
zoning bylaw amendment, in case you
Yeah.
wanted to know, according to the mayor.
Yeah.
There you go. Very good.
And
All
just
right.
one,
Oh, Paul, you had your
Sorry.
hand up there too. Oh,
go, Paul.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask, you said that there was a couple components that still weren't available, like the natural heritage and the density growth analysis figures. When do you think they're going to come in?
It all depends on the province.
Yeah.
The province has to respond, so they're kind of at the mercy of getting that response. And according to the deputy mayor, county staff has been advocating with the province in order to get those answers.
Okay,
But
thank
again,
you.
I don't.
That will delay things though, right?
It will. Yeah, they're vital pieces of the whole puzzle. Like, they need to know those answers.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Walsh.
It just, and I had noted this earlier, I think Ed had mentioned this. So once OP is approved, whenever that date is, we then have within 3 years to update our zoning bylaw amendment.
Yes, to update a new zoning, to do a new zoning bylaw. Yeah, to update it.
Or Zoobla, as our mayor calls it.
A Zoobla, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's the French in me. You should hear the Irish. All right. So I'm going to ask for a recommendation then from our CAO for our motion, so she can critique it to get it good for us as best we can. I know it's a long one, so we'll bear with her, and then we'll go through the motion.
Okay, that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood directs staff to provide the following comments to Peterborough County in regards to the draft official plan. The Township of Asphodel-Norwood supports a 15% intensification target as per the county's request to the province. And further, that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood requests that a 15% growth allocation be applied to Asphodel-Norwood as represented by recent building permit activity. And further, that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood requests that the appropriate residential land use designations be applied to the greenfield lands within the Village of Norwood settlement area. And further, that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood requests that section 3.4.2 of the draft official plan require a plan of subdivision condominium for more than 5 lots. And further, that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood requests that the exemption applied to section 5.6.24.I for Asphodel-Norwood be removed. And further, that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood requests section 5.7.1 be amended to allow home occupations in accessory buildings. And further, that the Township of Asphodel-Norwood directs staff to collaborate with MHBC to provide alternative language on the following sections to Peterborough County. And then it's 4.1.2.2F on-farm diversified uses, 4.1.5 to add cultivation of agricultural products to the language, 4.3 on natural core area, 6.2 natural heritage features, 6.3.1 wetlands, 9.3 key hydrological features and areas, and section 10 transportation. And further, that the Council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood directs staff to request a work plan and timeframe from county staff on the municipal comprehensive review and official plan process.
So that's just exactly what I was going to say. So thank you very much for that. I'll take a motion from. Who wants to put their hand up for that one? Councillor War, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Walsh. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Seeing no hands, then all in favor. That's carried. And thank you very much from Jamie and Alan. I really appreciated this. You guys are great to work with. I can just tell, and appreciate all that you've done with our staff.
Well, I'd just like to thank Candace and Ed again for all their help, and council for running an effective and efficient meeting today. I know there was a lot to get through, but it's certainly a good group to work with. There's some councils that aren't so fun to work with, and you guys are so far a very good one to work with.
We like to think of ourselves as number one, right? So we're a good team all throughout, that's for sure. Good council, good staff, and nobody tries to posture up to be better than somebody else, and that's why we're going where we're going, and we're open for business. So thanks.
Thanks, Jamie and Alan. Couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's good.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, on to the agenda here then. Next would be our staff and committee reports. This is a good news story. R6, Candace White, our CAO clerk treasurer, and this is regarding our preliminary development agreement, Norwood Park Phase 4. Who would have thought? Okay, Candace, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So DPH Development has applied for and received an official plan amendment for the property known as 158 Albine Street. The legal description of the property is included in Schedule A of the preliminary development agreement that's attached. The official plan amendment supported 148 unit subdivision to be located at the west end of Albine Street in the village of Norwood, which represents 96 single family dwellings and 52 townhomes. Obviously, there would be an extension of Albine Street to the west with a cul-de-sac, and they're proposing 3 internal streets that would be obviously conveyed to the township at the appropriate time of the process. And they have 3 submissions in: zoning bylaw amendment, complete subdivision, application of subdivision, as well as a consent, which you will see, I believe, at our next council meeting on Tuesday. So that we're working through all 3 processes. Obviously, to kickstart that, we need to adopt a preliminary development agreement as townships practice dictates to ensure that growth pays for growth, and that we're able to obtain the securities required to address any legal or engineering costs that the township incurs for peer review services, etc. The studies that have been submitted to date are listed in the staff report. They include a planning justification report, functional servicing, stage 1 and 2 ARC, stormwater management, geotech, traffic impact study, and environmental impact assessment. All of those will be peer reviewed as required by the township, and will utilize the securities that this agreement provides for the township. Again, it's standard for all developments. This allows us to collect the $20,000 for securities. It's a revolving security, which means when it drops below the $10,000 mark, we invoice and top the security back up throughout the process as needed and as required. It is the beginning of it. Obviously, we could potentially see a pre-servicing agreement, and then of course, Township Council will see the subdivision agreement at the appropriate time, as it will be a draft plan condition. I will take any questions from council.
Thank you. This just gets the ball rolling legal wise. So any other questions, council, at this time on this? We've been here before, seen it, done it. No questions? Okay.
Oh, actually, sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Just by the way, from an infrastructure standpoint, where are we at to be able to support the 4th phase here from a water sewer standpoint?
Well, that's what the agreement does. It allows us to peer review the functional servicing report. So the functional servicing report that they've recently submitted, now we have to go through with a fine-tooth comb. So it'll identify all of the constraints that potentially occur off-site and what it's going to require. No different than phase 3 triggered 600 meters of sanitary, but that wasn't determined until the review of the functionally servicing report. Then if there's any constraints, those constraints, there's always an H put on the property for servicing anyway, but all of those constraints or any off-site servicing that is required of the developer gets put into either a draft plan condition, but traditionally it goes in the subdivision agreement because they have to work through that as we see the off-site sanitaries happening, but they're building up there. So the development may have to be phased. You can get 30 units. Again, this is just a scenario. This has not been determined. Maybe you'll get 30 units and you need to ensure that this infrastructure is done. Then you can get 50. Then you need to ensure that this is done. They haven't applied for a phased development, but the township can force it to be phased based on any offsite servicing that needs to be addressed. But it is too early in the process to speak to all of those things.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This gets it rolling. Okay, anyone else have questions at this time? All right, no questions. Then I'd be looking for the recommendation for the motion then is that council receive this report for information, and that further that the council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood authorize myself, the mayor, and the clerk to execute a preliminary development agreement with DPH Developments Incorporated for Norwood Park Phase 4. Who'd like to make that motion? Deputy Mayor Burt, seconded by Councillor Wilburn Archer. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, thank you. Good meeting. All right, Madam Clerk, we'll have bylaws then, please.
Again, this is the bylaw that's going to clean up the addition of the fire prevention officer that that council needs to formalize through the bylaw process. No, Ed, you can leave the meeting if you need to. That's fine. Thank you, though. Thank you for all of your work today. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate that. Good job.
Thank you. That the bylaw to amend bylaw 2019-32 being a bylaw to establish and regulate a fire department for fire rescue services for the corporation of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in numbered bylaw 2022-05.
Motion by Councillor Archer, seconded by Deputy Mayor Burt. Any other discussion? All in favor? That's carried.
That the bylaw to authorize execution of a preliminary development agreement between DPH Developments, Inc. and the corporation of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in numbered bylaw 2022-06.
Motion by Councillor War, seconded by Councillor Walsh. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And the confirming bylaw.
That the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Asphodel-Norwood held February 17th, 2022 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in numbered bylaw 2022-07.
Motion by Councillor Archer, seconded by Deputy Mayor Burt. All in favor? That's carried. Council, you see a future meeting schedule ahead of you there. There should be no questions on that, I wouldn't think. None. And then I'll ask for a motion then that we adjourn this meeting at 12:18 p.m. February 17th, 2022. And our next regular meeting will be February 22nd, 2022 at 1 p.m. or at the call of the chair. So motioned by. Nobody wants to adjourn? Deputy Mayor Burt, seconded by Councillor Archer. All in favor? That's carried. Well, thank you very much, Council. That was a great meeting. I know I learned a lot today, and I think we're on the right track as far as our official plans concerned. Good work, staff. We can't say it any better. Like, we wouldn't be where we are today without you folks working as hard as you do behind the scenes. So thank you very much for all you do. All right.
It's my pleasure.
Yep. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.